In broad daylight, a knight in full plate armor raises his sword over two cornered sisters, ready to kill them in one stroke. The older girl squeezes her eyes shut and bites her lip, knowing she was forced into this and has no strength to fight back or run. She braces herself for death as the knight's longsword finally comes down, but the fatal pain never comes, and the girl slowly opens her eyes in confusion. The first thing she sees is the knight's sword hanging motionless in mid-strike. When she looks up at the knight, his attack has died completely because he is staring past her in open fear. Drawn by his gaze, the girl turns to see what could frighten the man who was about to kill her. What she finds is not a rescuer but a thin half-oval of blackness rising from the ground like a door, made of pure shadow. The strange opening fills everyone with unease, and the girl realizes something is coming out of it. The moment the figure becomes clear, the girl lets out a panicked scream. A skeletal being steps from the darkness, its red lights burning inside an empty skull as it surveys them like prey. In his fleshless hands he carries an ornate magic staff that looks majestic and terrifying at the same time. Wrapped in an intricately detailed black robe, he looks less like a person and more like death itself walking out of another world. His arrival is so overwhelming that the whole scene seems to freeze, as if time itself has stopped. The girl forgets even how to breathe until the silence breaks and she starts choking for air. At first she thinks this monster has come to drag her to the land of the dead, but then she realizes something is off. The knight who was about to cut her down is still frozen behind her, and that makes her realize the new arrival has stopped the execution. A broken wail of "Ga" creeps through the silence, and in her shock she cannot even tell whose voice it is. Then the skeletal figure slowly extends one hand past the girl, reaching not for her, but for the knight behind her. Frozen with fear, the older sister keeps staring at the deathly figure in front of her because looking away somehow feels even worse. Ains quietly says "grasp heart," and the spell lands with a brutal metal-crushing sound behind the girls. Curiosity finally beats terror, and the girl glances back to see the knight collapse like a puppet with its strings cut. One look is enough for her to understand that the knight is dead, and the danger has only changed shape. Ains walks toward them, and to the girl it feels like death itself is closing in to swallow her whole. She hugs her little sister tighter, because against something this inhuman, even the idea of running away is gone. With all hope shattered, the girl's last wish is simply to die without pain. She silently apologizes for failing to protect her sister and prays they can at least stay together in the afterlife. And right at that breaking point, the story abruptly shifts and opens a new beginning. The narration jumps to the year 2138 AD, when a new kind of entertainment defines the era, MMORPGs. These games let players dive straight into virtual worlds by linking a dedicated console directly to the brain through a nano interface. Instead of just controlling an avatar, players experience those worlds as if they were living there for real. Among all those virtual worlds, one title stands above the rest, Yggdrasil. Released back in 2126 after years of careful development, Yggdrasil built its reputation on one thing above all else: player freedom. Its class system was enormous, with more than 2,000 basic and advanced jobs for players to mix together. Because each class capped at 15 levels while the total level cap was 100, every high-level build had to combine several classes. Players could branch as wildly as they wanted if they met the requirements, which made identical characters almost impossible unless someone copied a build on purpose. Yggdrasil also let players customize armor, weapons, flavor text, and appearance in detail, so even their look could become completely their own. And the game backed that freedom with scale, spreading its adventures across 9 massive worlds. With its huge world, huge class pool, and near-limitless customization, Yggdrasil became the standout MMORPG of its age. Yggdrasil used to be so huge in Japan that the name basically stood for the whole MMORPG genre, but that glory is already fading into the past. The story cuts to a solemn guild room where a massive black stone table is ringed by 41 luxurious chairs, and almost all of them sit empty. Only 2 players are still here on the final day, making the empty seats feel like a quiet reminder of everyone who already left. Mamanga's avatar is an overlord, a top-tier undead caster built to wield the highest levels of magic. Across from him, Harahiro's avatar is an elder black ooze, a dangerous slime race feared for melting weapons and armor. Neither of them is a monster enemy here. They are players using Yggdrasil's heteromorphic races instead of ordinary human-like characters. Yggdrasil lets players choose from humanoid, demi-human, and heteromorphic races, and those last ones trade harsh drawbacks for stronger, more monstrous abilities. As Mamanga speaks, the game's limits show through too. His skull never moves, because even this advanced VR world still cannot animate facial speech properly for avatars like his. Mamanga greets Hirohiro warmly and admits he did not expect anyone to log in this late, even on Yggdrasil's final day. Hirohiro answers in a tired adult voice, and his sluggish tone makes it obvious he is running on fumes. Mamanga remembers that Hirohiro vanished after changing jobs in real life, and he realizes it has been about 2 years since they last met here. Hirohiro confirms it, and grimly jokes that endless overtime has wrecked his sense of time. Hearing that, Mamanga immediately drops the nostalgia and asks with real concern if Hirohiro is actually okay. In the guild room, Hirohiro admits his real body is falling apart from overwork, and he keeps dragging himself back only because he needs the money. Mamanga can only let out a pained groan and lower his head, genuinely shaken by how bad Hirohiro's life sounds. That reaction opens the floodgates, and Hirohiro starts venting about the misery of work without holding back. He runs through the full nightmare: useless subordinates, constantly changing spreadsheets, KPI scoldings, endless overtime, weight gain, and more medicine every day. Mamanga does not interrupt the rant and simply stays there for him, letting his friend empty out weeks of bottled-up stress. Most players would avoid real-life talk in a game, but for these two, complaining about work is normal instead of awkward. Their guild, Ainsul Gown, only accepted working adults who played heteromorphic characters, so job talk became part of how its members bonded. After about 10 minutes, Hirohiro finally runs out of steam, his torrent of complaints fading into an embarrassed apology. He adds that he cannot complain like this in real life, which makes it clear how trapped he feels outside the game. Mamanga immediately tells him not to worry, saying he was the one who asked busy Hirohiro to log in, so listening is the least he can do. He goes further and promises to hear out as many complaints as Hirohiro has, quietly showing how much this friendship matters to him. That support perks Hirohiro up, and he laughs with a little more energy as he thanks Mamanga for being a friend he could still meet online. Mamanga answers honestly that hearing that makes him happy too, and the mood briefly softens between them. Then Hirohiro awkwardly admits it is already time for him to log off. He starts operating his menu in midair, making the goodbye suddenly feel real. Mamanga glances at the time and agrees it is late, even though he clearly wishes the night were not ending yet. Hirohiro apologizes again, and Mamanga hides his regret behind a gentle sigh and a polite acceptance. Mamanga admits it is a shame because time flew by while they were together, quietly revealing how much he did not want this visit to end. Hirohiro says he really wanted to stay until the very end, but he is so exhausted he is about to fall asleep. Hearing how worn out he is, Mamanga stops resisting and tells him to log out and get proper rest. Before leaving, Hirohiro asks how long Mamanga plans to stay online in the guild room. Mamanga says he will remain until the game forcibly logs him out when the servers shut down, hoping someone else might still come by before then. Hirohiro sounds impressed and a little wistful, looking around as he remarks that he never expected this place to still be preserved so well. In the guild room, Mamanga keeps silent because Hirohiro's farewell is hitting him harder than he wants to show. Hirohiro gently thanks him, saying Mamanga kept the guild alive so everyone would always have a place to return to. Mamanga answers like a guild master, saying the guild belongs to everyone, so keeping it ready for their return was simply his job. Hirohiro says the guild was fun because Mamanga led it, and he hopes they can meet again someday in Yggdrasil too. Mamanga admits he has not heard of a sequel, but he quietly agrees he would like to meet that way too. Now sounding exhausted, Hirohiro says he can barely stay awake, decides to log off first, and tells Mamanga he is glad they met at the end. Mamanga hesitates for a beat before finally answering that he was happy to see Hirohiro too. Because Yggdrasil avatars cannot show facial expressions, Hirohiro sends a smiley emoticon instead of a real smile. Mamanga works the game interface and sends the same smiley back, matching the farewell as best he can. Hirohiro leaves Mamanga with one last promise, telling him, "Let's meet up again somewhere." Then Hirohiro vanishes, leaving Mamanga alone as the last of tonight's 3 guild members logs off. The room falls completely silent, so empty it feels like no one was ever there at all. Staring at Hirohiro's empty seat, Mamanga finally says the words he wanted to say too late, wishing Hirohiro had stayed with him until the game's final moment. There is no answer, and that silence drives home that Hirohiro is already back in the real world. Mamanga lets out a deep sigh and admits to himself it was probably better that he never asked. He remembers how tired Hirohiro sounded and decides asking him to stay longer would only have been selfish after Hirohiro already logged in for him on the last day. His eyes travel from Hirohiro's seat to the other 39 empty chairs, each one a reminder of old guildmates who never came back. When his gaze returns to Hirohiro's place, the line "let's meet up again somewhere" starts to sound hollow. Mamanga remembers hearing promises like "see you again" before, and every time they led to nothing because nobody ever returned to Yggdrasil. The bitterness finally bursts out as Mamanga trembles, snaps, and slams the table while shouting, "Are you kidding me?" Mamanga slams the black stone table with his bare hand, but Yggdrasil coldly judges it as an attack and returns only 0 damage. That useless result breaks his composure, and he blurts out the pain he has been holding in. How could anyone walk away from the great tomb of Nazarick they built together? But once the outburst fades, the room gives him nothing back except a hollow silence. Mamanga forces himself to be fair, reminding himself that his friends did not betray the guild lightly. They chose real life over a game, and that choice must have hurt them too. After steadying himself, he stands and walks toward the wall display where the guild's greatest symbol has been kept all this time. The staff before him is no ordinary treasure but the unique guild weapon of Ainsul Gown, unmistakably the emblem of everything the guild once was. Even though the weapon was made to suit his power, Mamanga had never used it, because a guild dies if its guild weapon is ever destroyed. Now, with the end of Yggdrasil only minutes away, he finally reaches out toward it. His hand stops halfway, because the thought hits him all at once: when the game shuts down, the glorious memories he made here with his friends may vanish forever. That fear leaves him suspended between action and grief, unable to decide what to do with the last symbol of the guild. His hesitation pulls him into memory, back to the days when everyone logged in every day with one shared goal: to build this guild weapon together. They turned the work into friendly competition, racing to gather materials faster than each other for the weapon's construction. And when it came to the design, they argued over how it should look until everyone's opinions slowly shaped it into its final form. For Mamanga, that long process was the golden age of Ain's old gown, the time when his happiest memories were made. Those memories mattered so much because his guildmates fought to be there, logging in after brutal workdays and sacrificing sleep just to keep playing together. Some even joked about the trouble it caused at home, arguing with their wives or taking leave from work just to stay online with the guild. In the empty guild room, Mamanga drifts through memories of the old days when Ain's old gown spent whole days chatting, planning adventures, chasing treasure, and fighting side by side. Those memories turn harsher as he recalls raids on enemy strongholds, desperate defense of their own base, and even a near disaster when a world-class enemy almost wiped the guild out. The room feels even colder when the truth lands. Out of 41 members, only 9 are left, and most of those do not even visit anymore. He opens the game console and checks the official guild rankings on the developer site, looking straight at the proof of how far they have fallen. Ain's old gown once climbed as high as 9th place, but on the final day of Yggdrasil it has slipped to 29th, after once sinking as low as 48th. Mamanga knows that rank did not survive because of his own effort alone, but because his former comrades left powerful treasures behind for the guild. To him, the guild now feels like a hollow relic of past glory, with all those vanished days condensed into one symbol. That symbol is the staff of Ain's old gown, the guild weapon carrying the memory of their best years. Mamanga wants to take the staff away so it will not keep hurting him with memories, but he cannot shake the feeling that leaving it here might matter too. That hesitation stirs a new thought in him, because the guild always decided everything by majority vote, and he rarely acted on his own authority as guild master. Now, with nobody else here, Mamanga finally decides to use the authority of the guild leader for himself. He mutters, "This is a pretty sad state of affairs," and starts changing into equipment worthy of the leader of a top-tier guild. As he equips himself, the game's hierarchy of item ranks leads all the way up to the divine class gear he chooses now. 9 different rings settle onto his 10 bony fingers, each carrying its own ability, and the rest of his accessories are just as outrageously valuable. His old robe is replaced by an even grander one, making him look less like a lonely player and more like a true supreme ruler. A red and black aura begins to rise around him, giving off an ominous presence even though it is only a built-in visual effect called disaster aura. As the aura swirls around him, stat indicators quietly rise in the corner of his vision, confirming the full boost from his new gear. Fully dressed in his divine class regalia, Mamanga looks himself over and finally feels like the ruler of the guild. He reaches out and takes the staff of Ain's old gown into his hand at last. The guild weapon answers him with a sinister glow, wrapping the staff in reddish-black light full of briefly forming, anguished faces. Even Mamanga is a little taken aback, muttering that the designers may have gone too far with the detail. The unused staff has finally reached its rightful owner, but that long-awaited moment comes only at Yggdrasil's final twilight. As his parameters surge upward, his pride is mixed with a sharp sadness. He gives the weapon a new meaning for himself and quietly says, "Let's go, symbol of the guild." Or no, my symbol of the guild. With that, Mamanga leaves the round table room and steps into Nazarek's silent halls. The room he leaves behind was the guild's return point, the place where any member wearing the guild ring would normally appear when logging in. But Mamanga already knows the truth. In these last minutes of the game, he is the only player left anywhere in the great underground tomb of Nazarek. He forces down the loneliness rising inside him and keeps moving forward. The halls of Nazarek still look magnificent, more like a royal palace than a tomb. Warm chandelier light sparkles across the polished floor, making the corridor shine like it has stars underfoot. Behind the doors on either side, decadent rooms and furnishings hint at just how extravagant this guild base once was. It is hard to believe this quiet sanctuary is the same Nazarek that once crushed the biggest invasion in Yggdrasil's history. More than 1,500 enemies from 8 guilds and their allies attacked this place, and Nazarek still beat them miserably. That legendary dungeon began as a 6th-floor stronghold, but Ain's old gown rebuilt it into something far greater after taking it over. Now Nazarek spans 10 floors, each with its own theme, from tombs and an underground lake to a glacier, rainforest, magma sea, wasteland, and finally the guild's divine upper floors. The 9th and 10th floors are the home of Ain's old gown, the base of a guild that once ranked among Yggdrasil's top 10. Back in the present, the only sounds are Mamanga's footsteps and the tapping of his staff through the sacred silence. After several turns through the vast corridors, he finally spots someone approaching from the distance. As the figure comes into view, Mamanga sees a beautiful woman with shoulder-grazing golden hair dressed in an elegant long-made outfit and large apron. In Nazarek's alabaster corridor, a tall graceful maid approaches Mamanga and quickly steps aside to bow as he nears. Mamanga quietly raises a hand in return, answering her respect even though he knows she is only an NPC. That unchanging smile reminds him she is a programmed maid, not a player, just a beautifully made doll running on AI routines. Even so, Mamanga cannot treat her coldly, because the 41 maids of Nazarick were built from his guildmate's effort. He studies her uniform closely and feels a pang of nostalgia at how absurdly detailed the embroidery is. The design pulls him back to Whitebrim's old obsession that maid uniforms were justice, and to the guild's half-exasperated memories of helping with it. He also remembers that Hirohiro and 5 others wrote the maid's AI, which makes this single bow feel like the work of old friends still living inside Nazarick. While Mamanga lingers, the maid finally lifts her head and tilts it in mild surprise, triggering one of the extra reactions hidden in her programming. The little motion impresses him, and for a second he wants to stay and see every hidden pose Hirohiro's team built into them. Then he checks the translucent watch on his left wrist and remembers there is no time left to indulge that feeling. So instead of lingering, Mamanga gives the maid a quiet farewell and thanks her for her hard work on Yggdrasil's last day. She gives no reply, but Mamanga walks past her anyway, carrying that painful little goodbye with him as he heads deeper into Nazarick. After a while, Mamanga reaches a gigantic staircase inside Nazarick and starts down it at a measured pace. At the bottom, he arrives on Nazarick's 10th floor and finds a formal receiving room with several figures already waiting. The first person to catch his eye is an old butler whose gentle face and razor-sharp stare make him feel anything but harmless. Behind the butler, 6 maids stand in line, but these are clearly not the ordinary service NPCs Mamanga saw earlier. Their maid outfits are built for war, with armored gauntlets and greaves, white headdresses, and a different weapon in each girl's hands. Even their looks are deliberately varied, giving the group a polished, custom-made feel instead of a generic NPC look. The scene makes the point plain: these girls were created as Nazarick's combat defenders, not as decorative staff. That leads into a bigger rule of Yggdrasil: guilds with castle-class bases get special defensive NPC benefits. For Nazarick, the automatic defenders are undead pop monsters that can appear on their own up to level 30. Those pop monsters are convenient because they revive for free after a while, even if invaders wipe them out. But their biggest weakness is just as clear: players cannot customize their AI or appearance. Against real player raiders, that makes the auto-spawns a pretty flimsy wall. The truly valuable defenders are the custom NPCs a guild can design from scratch to match exactly what it wants. A castle-grade guild base gets 700 total NPC levels to distribute however its members choose. Since level 100 is the cap, that pool could become a few top-tier guardians or a wider mix of weaker ones. And because custom NPCs can be outfitted and styled however their creators like, they can be built far stronger than ordinary spawn defenders. That freedom also means guilds can stamp their own personality onto a base instead of making everything about raw combat. One example sticks out as especially absurd. A guild called Kitty Kingdom filled its base with nothing but cats and cat-themed creatures. So in Yggdrasil, every guild can shape its own style freely, and Nazarick's battle maids are part of that same deliberate design. Looking at them all, Mamanga gives a quiet, satisfied Standing before the bowing butler and maids, Mamanga pauses with a hand at his chin, quietly struck by the old guild staff and the memories tied to this rarely visited hall. He opens a guild-only menu and finally checks what these NPCs are actually called. Mamanga lets out a small amused laugh, embarrassed that he had forgotten their names and reminded of all the guild arguments that once went into making them. Looking them over, he remembers Seabass was built as a proper house steward, with the 6 combat maids under him as the Pleiades. Seabass's profile has even more detail behind it, but with the shutdown coming soon, Mamanga decides he has no time to read all that now. That choice carries some weight, because the guild had poured real pride into these NPCs, building them with detailed backstories and custom designs instead of treating them like filler defenders. He also remembers the harsh truth: Seabass and the Pleiades were meant to be a last delay against invaders, and if enemies ever reached this deep, these guardians were only supposed to buy time. But no one ever made it this far, so these loyal NPCs have spent all this time simply waiting for orders they were never given. Mamanga tightens his grip on the staff of Ain's old gown, shaken by a surge of pity he knows he should not be feeling from mere data. Even after reminding himself they are just NPCs with scripted reactions, he still chooses to act like their guild master to the end. So he declares, a little awkwardly but sincerely, that he will put the NPCs to good use. He almost laughs at how corny he sounded, but he follows through and gives the order anyway. Seabass and the Pleiades bow in perfect unison, accepting the command without hesitation. As he leads them away, Mamanga knows this is not what the guild originally intended for shared NPCs, but with the whole world about to end tonight, he lets himself break that rule. Their footsteps echo through the corridors until the group reaches a huge domed chamber called the Lemegeton. Inside, 72 wall niches ring the chamber, most holding demon-shaped statues, and the grim room lives up to its occult name from the Lesser Key of Solomon. As Mamanga crosses the Lemegeton with Seabass and the battle maids behind him, the room itself is framed as Nazarick's last line of defense. Most of the 72 demon statues lining the hall are actually rare golems, but only 67 were ever finished because their creator got bored and quit. The crystal lamps above are monsters too, ready to summon top-tier elementals and bombard intruders with area magic the moment enemies enter range. Mamanga knows that if all those lamps fired at once, they could wipe out 2 full level 100 parties, so he treats this place with real respect. At the end of the hall, He faces a towering set of double doors carved into a beautiful goddess on one side and a cruel demon on the other. The design immediately reminds him of an old guild decision. If anyone ever reached this far, Nazarick would welcome those heroes proudly instead of hiding. He quietly calls out Albert's name, remembering the guildmate who loved evil theatrics more than anyone. Looking at the room, Mamanga can only mutter that maybe all this over-the-top evil styling came from pure Chunibu. Then his mood shifts back to caution when he wonders if the goddess and demon statues might actually attack him. His suspicion is justified, because even he does not know every hidden mechanism in Nazarick, and retired guild members could have left nasty surprises behind. That fear gets sharper when he remembers one creator once built a powerful golem whose flawed combat AI suddenly attacked everyone nearby. Mamanga still is not sure that disaster was really an accident, so he glares at the doors and warns Lucifer not to pull the same kind of stunt on him. But the trap he feared never comes. The moment he touches the doors, they begin to open on their own under their own massive weight. As the gap widens, the air itself changes, and the quiet solemnity of the hall turns into a crushing pressure that bears down on his whole body. What opens before him is not just another room but an exquisitely made grand chamber so huge that even hundreds of people would not make it feel full. The white walls, gold ornamentation, and rainbow jewel chandeliers bathe the immense room in a dreamlike glow, ending the moment on pure overwhelming grandeur. Mamanga enters Nazarick's throne room and is met by a display built to overwhelm him, with 41 guild flags hanging around a crystal throne beneath a huge red banner. Even Mamanga stops and breathes out in awe, feeling that this might be the most magnificent place in all of Yggdrasil. That grandeur settles his mood, and he quietly decides this is the right place to witness the game's final moments. As he approaches the throne, Mamanga notices a woman already waiting at its side. She looks almost divine at first glance, wearing a pure white dress and a faintly perfect smile, with long black hair falling to her waist. Then the unsettling details stand out: golden slit pupil eyes, curled horns, and black feathered wings at her waist turn that holy image into something much more dangerous. Her calm smile feels less comforting the longer Mamanga looks, as if she is hiding everything behind a flawless mask. Mamanga also takes in the details of her gear, including a golden spiderweb necklace and a strange wand capped by a floating black orb. He recognizes her at once as Albedo, the overseer of Nazarick's floor guardians and the highest-ranked NPC in the entire tomb. Because of that position, Albedo alone is allowed to wait for orders here in the deepest chamber of Nazarick. But instead of greeting her warmly, Mamanga narrows his gaze and questions something immediately. He knew one world-class item was stored here, so why are there two now? That question matters because world-class items are the game's ultimate treasures, rare enough to shake the balance of Yggdrasil itself. Some of those items are so absurdly powerful that they can even force changes to the game's rules, though not every one reaches that level. Even owning a single one is enough to make a player famous across Yggdrasil. And Nazarick's guild stands far above everyone else, because Ain's Old Gown controls 11 world-class items while the next strongest guild only has 3. Mamanga remembers that he was only allowed to keep one world-class item for himself, while the rest of those absurdly rare treasures were hidden across Nazarick, mostly deep in the treasury under heavy protection. That makes Albedo's necklace stand out even more, and Mamanga realizes the only reason she has such a treasure is because her creator personally gave it to her. Even so, on the last day of the game, Mamanga chooses not to take it away and quietly respects his old guildmate's wishes. At the foot of the throne steps, Mamanga tells Seabass and the Pleiades, this is a good place, meaning they should wait there. He starts climbing alone, but footsteps follow him, and the awkward mistake makes him laugh at himself. Mamanga realizes the NPCs are too literal to guess his intent, and because he rarely dealt with them after the other guild members left, he forgot he needed to give a precise order. He thinks back on the routine that caused that distance. After his friends stopped logging in, he spent his days grinding gold alone to keep Nazarick running. He even avoided other players in the dangerous places he used to challenge with his guild, then logged out after depositing the earnings in the treasury day after day. Back in the throne room, Mamanga finally gives the proper command, stand by. The footsteps stop at once, and with the room finally still, he climbs the last few steps to the throne. When he reaches the throne, Mamanga studies Albedo more closely and notices something unsettling. Her eyes seem to follow him, which he does not remember happening before. Curiosity wins out, and he decides to check the flavor text that Albedo's creator wrote into her settings. He only knows the basics about her, that she is the overseer of the Guardians and Nazarick's highest-ranked NPC, so he starts digging through the rest. The screen floods his vision with a ridiculous wall of text, so long it feels like an epic poem, and Mamanga instantly regrets opening it. He feels like he just stepped on a landmine, and silently curses himself for forgetting how excessive Albedo's creator could be. But since he already opened it, he gives up on reading properly and just rushes straight to the bottom looking for the important part. Then his eyes hit the final line, and he goes completely still. The last sentence reads, "She is also a slut," and the absurd line leaves Mamanga staring in disbelief. He blurts out a baffled and rereads it several times, hoping he misunderstood, but the words refuse to mean anything else. After circling the problem in his head, Mamanga can only settle on one uneasy answer. Maybe it is meant as some kind of insult. Looking over Albedo's absurd flavor text, Mamanga can't understand why anyone would write one of the guild's precious NPCs like this, even if Tabula Smaragdina loved bizarre jokes. After hesitating, he decides the guild master is allowed to fix this, and finally uses authority he has never exercised before. Using the guild weapon and his special access, Mamanga edits Albedo's settings directly and deletes the offending line from her backstory. The empty gap bothers him, so despite feeling ridiculous, he decides to fill it himself. In a burst of private embarrassment, Mamanga types a new line into Albedo's flavor text: "She loves Mamanga." He immediately cringes at himself, but with the game ending soon, he decides to leave the line there and pretend the embarrassment will disappear with everything else. When he looks up again, his satisfaction fades into a lonely realization: Albedo, Seabass, and the 6 maids are still frozen in silent standby around the throne. Remembering a command, Mamanga raises a hand and quietly gives the order: "Kneel." They all drop to one knee in perfect unison, and the flawless obedience reassures him that the command worked. He checks the time and sees only a few minutes remain before Yggdrasil shuts down for good. While the rest of the game world is probably celebrating the finale, Mamanga stays sealed inside Nazarick, thinking only about this place he poured himself into. As the final minutes tick down, Mamanga stares up at the ceiling and decides to wait as guild master in case one last group of invaders comes for Nazarick. After emailing every guild member, Mamanga is left with only a handful of replies, but he still decides to stay and welcome anyone who comes back as guild master. Looking around the silent hall, he bitterly admits the guild has become a relic of the past. Even as an empty shell, Ainzel Gown still means a lot to him, so his eyes drift up to the 41 guild flags hanging from the ceiling. He points to his own emblem first, and quietly claims it as his. Then he names Touch Me, the founder who gathered the original 9, and stood at the very top of the game. His finger moves to Shijuten Suzaku, the oldest member of the guild and a university lecturer in real life. He keeps going with Enkoro Machimochi, one of the guild's 3 women, and the naming starts to flow more easily. Soon he is reciting name after name from memory, proving none of his old comrades have faded from his mind. He finishes all 41 names without hesitation, and that only makes the silence hit harder. Sprawling back on the throne, Mamanga can only admit that those days were genuinely fun. He remembers how much of his salary he poured into Yggdrasil, not because he was rich, but because the game was the only thing he really had. One memory still stings. He burned almost an entire bonus on the cash gacha just to scrape out one rare item. When he found out Yumeko pulled that same rare item for the price of a lunch, the jealousy was almost embarrassing. Still, big spending was normal in Ainzel Gown, because most of its members were working adults who treated the game as a serious hobby. Even among them, Mamanga knows he was one of the biggest spenders on the whole server, maybe near the very top. But the money was never the real point. What he loved most was adventuring and laughing with his friends. For a man who lost his parents and never found real-life friends, the guild was one of the brightest things in his entire life. That is why the thought of this guild disappearing now feels unbearable. He grips the staff of Ainzel Gown tighter, painfully aware that an ordinary salaryman like him has no power to stop the end. Then he checks the time and sees the brutal countdown, 23:57, with the server shutting down at midnight. With only minutes left, he braces himself for the virtual world to end and for real life to drag him back tomorrow. He tells himself this is only natural, because nobody can live in a virtual world forever, and that is why everyone else already left. In the end, all Mamanga can do is sit in that silent throne room and let out a long, defeated sigh. With work waiting at 4 in the morning, Mamanga plans to log off the instant Yggdrasil shuts down. He sets his watch to count the last seconds, treating the shutdown like a final ceremony. As midnight approaches, Mamanga closes his eyes and waits for the world to end and the automatic logout to pull him back home. Midnight passes, but nothing happens. Mamanga opens his eyes and realizes he is still inside the throne room. He checks the time again and knows the server should already have forced him out. Trying to stay rational, he looks for an explanation and wonders if the shutdown was delayed or if the players were given extra time. Then his unease spikes when he reaches for the message panel and realizes the command console is simply gone. He tries every emergency option he can think of, from chat to a GM call to forced logout, and none of them respond. The missing system should have thrown him into panic, but what really shakes him is how strangely calm he still feels underneath it. His frustration finally bursts out, and his angry shout echoes through the silent hall. He bitterly suspects some last-day prank, furious that even the end of the game is being ruined. Then the impossible happens. A beautiful woman's voice suddenly answers him with, "What's wrong, Mamanga-sama?" When he finds the speaker, Mamanga is left speechless because the one addressing him is Albedo, the NPC who has raised her head and spoken on her own. The story then shifts away from Nazarick to Carne Village, a tiny frontier settlement on the kingdom's border near the Empire and the Great Forest of Tab. With only about 120 people and 25 families, the village survives through farming and the nearby forest, cut off from almost everything except herb gatherers and tax collectors. Because the village has no magical lighting like the cities, its people start work with the sunrise and spend the whole day laboring until dark. 16-year-old Enriamat lives the same hard village day over and over, starting before sunrise by hauling water from the well for her family. Her life barely changes: breakfast, field work with her parents, a rough lunch at noon, more labor until sunset, and chores by the fire before bed. After years of that same routine, Henry quietly wonders how long these unchanging days will go on. But this morning starts out looking exactly like every other one, and Henry heads back to the well for water again. She knows the drill so well that she is already counting the 3 trips it will take to fill the tank at home. With a quick little yash, Henry rolls up her sleeves and gets ready to haul the load. Her arms look slim, but years of farm work have made her strong enough to lift the full buckets without hesitation. As she walks home, Henry grumbles to herself that bigger buckets might save effort, before admitting she probably could not carry them anyway. Then a strange sound cuts through the morning, and Henry turns toward it as the air suddenly feels wrong. She catches the sound of wood breaking, and fear starts rising before she even understands why. A strangled cry follows, and Henry freezes because it sounds horribly like a person screaming. She tries to tell herself it has to be a mistake, but the chill down her spine says otherwise. The moment she realizes the scream came from the direction of her home, denial snaps and she bolts. Henry throws away the buckets on the spot because there is no way she can run carrying that weight. She almost tangles herself in her long skirt, but sheer luck keeps her from falling. Then the scream rings out again, and this time Henry knows for certain it is human. She runs harder than she ever has in her life, legs nearly tangling as panic drives her forward. As Henry gets closer, the nightmare sharpens into hoarse neighs, people's screams, and angry shouting ahead. In the distance, Henry sees an armored stranger cut down Morga, one of her own villagers, and finish him without hesitation. She knows exactly who died, and even though she wants to stop, Henry forces herself to keep running. The road to her house feels endless as shouting and curses spread through the village. Henry bursts through the door calling for her parents and Nemu, and finds them frozen in fear until they realize she made it home alive. Her father and mother rush to embrace her, and the family realizes they stayed too long because they were waiting for Henry. That fear becomes real when an Imperial Knight reaches their home and looms at the entrance, coldly sizing up the family inside. Henry understands in one terrified instant that the war between the Empire and Kingdom has reached their quiet village at last. Just as the knight moves to enter, Henry's father throws himself forward and slams him out of the doorway. Outside, her father yells for them to run while he grapples with the knight, already bleeding from a cut on his face. Seeing her father's blood turns Henry's mind blank, and for a moment she cannot choose between helping him and fleeing. Her mother's desperate shout snaps Henry back, and one look at that heartbroken face tells her they have to leave now. Henry grabs Nimi's hand and runs after her mother, carrying guilt with her as they flee toward the great forest of Tab. As Karne village falls into chaos, Henry runs through the streets with horses screaming, steel clashing, and the sick smell of burning flesh closing in behind her. She keeps herself low and hugs the corners of houses, because crossing open ground now feels like asking to be seen and killed. Fear keeps trying to lock her legs, but the small hand in hers reminds Henry that she cannot stop now. Ahead of them, their mother suddenly freezes and whips around, frantically signaling the girls to turn back and run another way. The moment Henry understands why her mother is warning them off, she bites her lip and forces back tears before she can break down. So Henry tightens her grip on Nemu and runs, because if they hesitate, they will be forced to watch something far worse happen next. Far away in Nazarick, Albedo keeps asking what is wrong, but Mamanga is so rattled by everything around him that his thoughts nearly stop. All Mamanga can manage at first is a strained apology while he stares at her, still trying to process what feels terribly wrong. Albedo leans in even closer to check on him, and the realism of her beauty, voice, and scent jolts his mind back into motion. He quickly insists that nothing is wrong, but the answer sounds forced even to him. Mamanga realizes the real problem is not one broken detail but the impossible fact that Albedo feels like a living person, and he has no idea what to make of it. He wants to panic, but a guildmate's old advice cuts through the noise: stay calm, think logically, and do not waste yourself on fear. Remembering Punito Mo's words finally helps Mamanga steady himself and start thinking again. But before he can fully recover, Albedo asks again from point-blank range, close enough that her breath almost throws him right back into panic. Fighting through the distraction, Mamanga finally voices the one solid fact he has: the GM call function is not working. Even knowing she should only be an NPC, Mamanga cannot stop reacting to how real Albedo feels, and the attention from her rattles him in a very human way. Then, just like before, the heat in his chest is abruptly snuffed out, and Mamanga drops back into an unnatural calm. Even as his emotions stay strangely muted, Mamanga forces himself to stop dwelling on it when Albedo apologizes for failing to answer his question about GM call and begs for another order. That reply hits Mamanga hard, because it proves Albedo is not using canned NPC lines at all and is actually holding a real conversation with him. He reels at how impossible that should be, remembering that even advanced NPCs in Yggdrasil were only supposed to follow preset responses and simple commands. To test whether this is only Albedo, Mamanga dismisses her with a small wave, and her face flickers with obvious disappointment as she withdraws. He immediately turns to the others and calls out to Seabass and the maids, testing the room with a sharper command. Their perfect chorus of yes confirms they can answer him naturally too, not just obey in silence. When Mamanga orders them to approach the throne, they understand him instantly and move without any typed input at all. They kneel again right in front of him, and Mamanga locks in two facts at once: spoken intent is enough, and every NPC here is acting beyond the rules he knows. As he studies the room, Mamanga realizes something is wrong with more than the NPCs, so he fixes his gaze back on Albedo to find it. Under that stare, Albedo hesitates and asks if she made a mistake, and her shifting expression finally shows him the real problem. Mamanga does not explode. He just freezes and realizes that Albedo's mouth and face are moving with her words like a living person. Then the realization slams into him from the other side too, and he grabs his own jaw in panic because his mouth is moving when he speaks. That should not happen in any DMMORPG, especially not for a skull with no tongue, throat, lungs, or organs, so Mamanga stares down at his bare bones trying to make sense of it. His certainty about the world starts to crumble, but just as the fear surges up, that strange emotional suppression crushes it flat again. He slams a hand against the throne to test reality, yet no damage numbers appear, leaving him with no answer and one bleak question about what he can possibly do next. Ains realizes anger will get him nowhere here, so he forces himself to stop panicking and start looking for clues instead. He calls Seabass first, because if anyone can safely scout this strange situation, it is the loyal butler standing right in front of him. Seabass looks so sincere that Ains wavers for a second, wondering if these are really the NPCs he knew, but he decides he has no better option. Ains briefly glances at Albedo, pushes down his unease, and puts on the stern air of a boss giving orders to a subordinate. He orders Seabass to leave the tomb, investigate the area around Nazarick, and deal peacefully with any intelligent beings he finds. Ains adds strict limits: stay within 1 kilometer, avoid pointless fighting, and try to accommodate the other side during talks. Seabass accepts at once, and his immediate obedience gives Ains a small but important sign that Nazarick's hierarchy still works. That answer rattles Ains, because in Yggdrasil-based defense NPCs were never supposed to leave a guild base at all. Even so, he stops himself from jumping to conclusions and decides he can only trust the result after Seabass actually returns. To make the scouting safer, Ains orders Seabass to take one of the Pleiades and retreat immediately if a fight breaks out. With that first reconnaissance move set, Ains lets go of the staff of Ains' old gown. The staff hangs in midair instead of falling, a familiar game world trick that quietly confirms some Yggdrasil rules still apply. A dark spirit-like aura still clings to his hand, and this time Ains decides to test another game function instead of ignoring it. He snaps his fingers and cleanly dismisses the aura, checking whether built-in commands still work here too. After that small success, Ains folds his arms again and turns to the bigger problem, contacting the game company for answers. He knows a GM should understand this situation best, but the usual fast support methods may not work anymore. So he tries a different angle and considers casting message, even though it was originally meant to contact other players, not administrators. The idea is shaky because the spell has restrictions, and in this impossible situation he cannot even assume magic itself still works normally. Even with all those doubts, Ains decides he has to test it, because a level 100 caster who cannot use magic would lose mobility, information, and most of his fighting power. In Nazarick's silent throne room, Mamanga gives up on testing magic here because the place still feels too sacred to treat like a lab. As he looks for a better testing ground, Mamanga realizes there is something even more important to confirm first: whether his authority as guild master still truly holds. The NPCs he has met so far obey him, but Mamanga knows Nazarick also holds NPCs as strong as he is, so he cannot relax until he knows their loyalty is real. He glances down at kneeling Seabass, the battle maids, and Albedo beside him, measuring their devotion instead of taking it at face value. Albedo is smiling beautifully, but something hidden in that smile unsettles Mamanga and makes his doubts sharper. Mamanga starts thinking like a ruler in the real world and worries that loyalty might vanish the moment he shows weakness or keeps making mistakes. He weighs one answer after another, including rewarding subordinates with treasures from the guild vault, even if spending his old friend's legacy hurts. He also wonders whether rank alone makes him supreme here, but he still does not understand what rule actually defines his superiority. That uncertainty finally narrows to one brutal possibility, and Mamanga quietly tests the word for himself: power. When he reaches for that idea, the staff of Ains' old gown flies into his grasp as if answering him, and he pictures overwhelming force as the simplest way to rule. The brilliant staff almost seems to urge him on, but Mamanga pulls back and decides not to settle that question in the heat of the moment. He cuts the thought off, says he will think it through later, and lets the staff drop instead of embracing raw force right away. The staff falls away with an almost resentful feel, while Mamanga settles on a temporary strategy. If he never shows weakness, even dangerous followers should hesitate to move against him. To test that authority in practice, Mamanga suddenly gives a firm order to the Pleiades. All but Seabass's assigned escort are to head to the 9th floor and stop any invaders coming from the 8th. The maids answer at once with complete respect, and that smooth obedience is exactly the response Mamanga needed to hear. Mamanga presses the test one step further and orders them to begin immediately, keeping his tone hard and unquestionable. Again the answer comes back without hesitation, and the whole group moves as one to bow and carry out his command. The giant doors open, Seabass and the maids file out of the throne room, and Mamanga watches them leave in silence. When the doors close behind them, Mamanga is quietly relieved because no one challenged him, and for now that means his authority still stands. Relieved for the moment, Mamanga looks to the one person still waiting at his side, and Albedo calmly asks what he wants her to do next. Still a little awkward, Mamanga rises from the throne, moves to retrieve his staff, and calls Albedo closer. As Albedo comes within arm's reach, Mamanga briefly catches her scent and has to shut down his own distracted thoughts. He reaches out to touch her hand, but the instant contact is made, Albedo winces and Mamanga jerks back in alarm. Mamanga immediately worries that he made her uncomfortable, and old bad memories of being rejected flash through his mind. Then he figures it out. As an overlord, his elder lich body carries passive negative energy on touch, and that must have hurt her. That answer brings a worse question, because Nazaric's people should count as allies, so Mamanga wonders if Albedo is no longer guild-aligned or if friendly fire has somehow been turned on. He decides friendly fire is the more likely explanation and apologizes for forgetting to turn the skill off. Albedo dismisses the pain as trivial and, with embarrassing sincerity, says she would gladly bear any hurt from him. Her shy little cry and bashful face covering knock what remains of Mamanga's dignity off balance. While Albedo keeps rambling in dangerously intimate territory, Mamanga turns his focus to the practical problem and instinctively learns how to switch the passive touch off. That easy, natural control makes Mamanga realize how quickly he is adapting to this undead body, and the thought unsettles him enough to laugh at himself. To confirm it, Mamanga warns Albedo that he is going to touch her again, and she answers with breathless anticipation. This time he takes her hand safely, fights down another rush of desire, and concentrates on feeling for a pulse. And when Mamanga feels Albedo's steady heartbeat, the truth lands hard. She is not acting like a program anymore, she is alive. After letting go of Albedo's hand, Mamanga stares at his own polished white arms and confirms the obvious but unsettling truth. This body is fully undead, with no flesh, blood, or heartbeat at all. He turns back to Albedo and freezes again, because she does not look like lifeless game data anymore. Her moist golden eyes reflect him, and her flesh face looks painfully real. That realism shakes him badly, and Mamanga starts wondering if Yggdrasil itself has somehow become a real world instead of a game. He tries to deny the idea, but once it takes hold he cannot ignore it, so he forces himself toward one last test that might prove what kind of world he is standing in. Even knowing Albedo might lash out with her weapon, Mamanga decides he has to ask something outrageous to complete the experiment. So Mamanga bluntly asks Albedo if he may touch her chest, and the room seems to go dead silent the instant the words leave his mouth. The second he hears himself, Mamanga is hit with crushing self-disgust and knows he sounds like a ruler abusing his position for harassment. But he still convinces himself this test is necessary, forcibly regains his ruler's composure, and awkwardly doubles down instead of backing off. Albedo reacts in the exact opposite way he feared, lighting up with joy and giving him cheerful permission without a trace of offense. Then she openly presents herself for inspection, making Mamanga even more tense because she is not embarrassed at all, just delighted. While he prepares to follow through, a calmer corner of Mamanga's mind watches in disbelief, wondering why he is still doing this at all. A quick glance at Albedo only makes it worse, because her shining eyes and eager body language are basically begging him to hurry up. Mamanga steadies his trembling resolve and finally reaches out, committing to the test despite all the tension in the air. The touch gives him a clear physical answer, first resistance beneath the fabric, then unmistakably soft living flesh, while Albedo lets out a heated voice in response. That result completes another of Mamanga's experiments, and it nearly kills his first hopeful explanation that this might simply be a replacement game after Yggdrasil ended. Mamanga first tests the obvious explanation and reminds himself that explicit sexual acts are heavily banned in VR games, with public shaming, deleted accounts, and even legal punishment waiting for anyone who breaks the rules. That makes his situation even stranger, because if this were still an ordinary game, the system or the admins should have blocked him the moment he tried anything improper with Albedo. He then thinks about the law and realizes this kind of forced immersion would count as cyber-kidnapping if a player was trapped in a game without permission, or a way to log out. If a company really did this, it would be inviting prosecution, fines, prison time, and a full record of the player's trapped activity as evidence. He pushes the logic further and tells himself that if he vanished from work for a week, someone would check his apartment, and the authorities would uncover the truth fast. So from a profit and risk angle, Mamanga can't believe the game company would stage something this reckless just to trap him. That leaves him with a harsher conclusion. If someone caused this, it has to be a third party, which means all his earlier assumptions may already be useless. The problem is that once he throws out those answers, he has no clue where to begin looking next. Then one last possibility creeps in, absurd but impossible to ignore. What if this virtual world has somehow become real? He instantly rejects that idea as nonsense, because turning a game into reality should be completely impossible. But the more he thinks, the more that ridiculous answer starts fitting the facts better than anything else, and that chills him. What finally pushes him is a simple memory. Albedo had a scent, and that should not have been possible inside Yggdrasil. He recalls the old VR restrictions clearly. By law, games were not allowed to reproduce smell or taste, and even touch was tightly limited to stop players from confusing games with real life. That means Yggdrasil's food, drink, and physical contact were supposed to be little more than controlled system feedback, not real sensory experience. Now those limits are gone, and the realization hits Mamanga hard because it makes this place feel terrifyingly real. His mind immediately floods with practical fear about tomorrow's job and what happens if this continues, but he forcefully shoves those worries aside to stay focused. Still reeling in the throne room, Mamanga stares at Albedo and realizes this world is too detailed to be a normal simulation. He finally pulls his hands away from Albedo's chest, awkwardly aware he held on far too long. Mamanga gives a stiff apology, trying to act composed after what he just did. Instead of being offended, Albedo lets out a breathy moan and shyly asks if this will be her first time here. Her question hits Mamanga so hard that he just freezes and blurts out a blank, confused response. Albedo keeps going, asking whether he wants her to undress herself, be unwrapped by him, or even stay in the dress if that is his preference. At last Mamanga understands the misunderstanding, and an ugly internal battle starts before he forces himself to stop it. He cuts her off and says this ends here because they do not have time for that kind of thing. Albedo instantly snaps back into duty and apologizes for letting her own desire take over during an urgent moment. When Albedo moves to kneel in apology, Mamanga stops her and takes the blame himself. He immediately shifts into ruler mode and tells her to summon the floor guardians, except those on the 4th and 8th floors, to the 6th floor Coliseum in 1 hour. He adds that he will contact Aura and Mare himself, so Albedo does not need to notify them. Albedo carefully repeats the order back to him, making sure she has every exception correct. Mamanga confirms the order and sends her out, and Albedo departs at once. The moment the doors close behind her, Mamanga's exhausted front collapses into a long, miserable groan. He realizes exactly why Albedo reacted that way. He once edited her settings as a joke and changed her backstory to say she was in love with Mamanga. Now the joke feels horrible, because he believes he has stained the Albedo that Tabula Smaragdina carefully created. The thought of ruining someone else's painstaking work leaves Mamanga cursing under his breath and sinking into genuine misery. Even with his worry still hanging over him, Mamanga finally pushes himself up from the throne. He forces himself to shelve the problem for now, deciding he can wrestle with it later after the urgent matters are handled. Mamanga immediately calls the demons of the Lemegeton to his side, putting Nazarek's heavy golems between himself and any threat. Now that he is treating this world as real, Mamanga's first priority is simple: make sure he can still protect himself if the next NPC is not obedient. He thinks through every tool he might need to survive here, from Nazarek's facilities to magic, items, and the constructs under his command. Seeing the golems respond perfectly calms him a little, and he quietly admits that at least one problem is solved. He tightens control by ordering the golems to obey only him, quietly preparing a hidden countermeasure in case Nazarek's NPCs ever turn on him. With that safeguard in place, Mamanga turns his attention to his own body and equipment, starting with the rings on his hands. The sight is unusual even by game standards, because Yggdrasil normally only allowed 2 rings, but Mamanga paid for the rare advantage of wearing 10 at once. He notes that power-focused players often bought the same upgrade, so this part at least still fits the old rules he knows. One ring matters more than the others: the ring of Ain's old gown, marked with the same emblem as the great banner behind the throne. Every member of Ain's old gown had one of these rings, making it feel less like gear and more like a sign that the guild still exists around him. He remembers that each ring slot assignment was permanent, which is why he deliberately kept his left ring finger free after sending one weaker but troublesome ring to the treasury. That guild ring is crucial because it bypasses Nazarek's anti-teleport defenses and lets its wearer jump between named rooms or even enter from outside. Even this power has limits though, because the throne room and the guild members' personal chambers are excluded from its reach. It is also the key to the treasury, so Mamanga knows he cannot afford to lose it now. After a tense pause, he decides there is no point hesitating anymore and prepares to test whether the ring's power still works in this new reality. The moment Mamanga activates the ring, the world vanishes into sudden blackness. When his vision returns, he is no longer in the throne room but standing in a dark tunnel lit by artificial lights, facing a giant lowered portcullis. The successful jump gives Mamanga his first solid proof that one of Nazarek's most important systems is still under his control. Relieved that the ring teleport worked, Mamanga heads alone down Nazarek's wide torchlit tunnel toward the portcullis ahead. As he nears the gate, a vivid smell of earth and grass hits him, and that impossible jungle scent makes this world feel even more real. The sensation only raises a more unsettling question for him. Without lungs or a throat, how is his undead body even breathing at all? He cuts off that line of thinking before it spirals and keeps moving forward. The portcullis rises on its own right as he arrives, opening the way into the 6th floor arena beyond. Past the gate, Mamanga enters a massive Roman-style coliseum lit bright as day, with rows of silent clay golems watching from every seat. He remembers what this place was built for. Intruders became the entertainment here, and almost every enemy that invaded Nazareth died in this arena. When he reaches the center and looks up, the black night sky above still feels real, even though he knows it is only Nazarik's 6th floor imitation. That fake sky calms him, partly because his heart is still human, and partly because this place carries the work and memories of the guild that built it. For a moment he wants to stay here and just breathe, but the situation will not let him rest. He scans the arena and realizes nobody is here, even though the Dark Elf twins should have been managing this floor. Then a loud shout breaks the silence from above. A small figure dives down from the VIP seats, flipping through the air and landing with absurd, effortless agility instead of magic. After sticking the landing with a grin, the mystery jumper throws up a cheerful V sign. From above the arena, a small figure drops into view, and Mamanga is suddenly facing a dark elf child instead of the kind of guardian he expected. The girl is Aura Bellafiora, the 6th floor guardian, and her bright smile, mismatched eyes, and childlike look make her feel more like an eager little ranger than a threat. Mamanga calls her name, confirming that this cheerful child is really Aura, the beast-taming guardian of this floor. Aura jogs over to him at absurd speed, crossing the distance so fast it feels closer to a beast charge than a child's run. She slams to a stop in front of Mamanga, metal-plated soles grinding up a cloud of dust that somehow never touches him. Aura plays it up with a fake wipe of the forehead and a puppy-like grin, then happily welcomes Mamanga to the floor she guards. Her respect matches the others, but the way she talks to him feels warmer and more familiar, which finally lets Mamanga ease up a little. After checking her expression and finding no hostility at all, Mamanga loosens his grip on the staff and drops his emergency plan for a sudden retreat attack. Mamanga answers more casually that he will be intruding for a while, testing the mood now that he believes this meeting is safe. Aura immediately pushes back, saying Nazarik belongs to him, so there is nowhere here where its supreme ruler could ever be an intruder. That answer settles him, and Mamanga follows the obvious next question by asking whether Mare is here too. Aura realizes what he means, whips around toward the VIP box above, and loudly calls out that Mare should show himself before Mamanga. Something shifts inside the shadows overhead, confirming that Mare really is hiding up there. Aura casually explains that Mare is just very timid, then orders him again to jump down and greet Mamanga properly. A faint answer finally comes back from the box, and with Aura's magic necklace carrying the sound, Mare nervously admits that he cannot do it. Aura grabs her head and hurriedly tells Ains that Mare is only terrified, not disrespectful. Ains answers gently and reassures Aura that he never doubted her loyalty, taking the panic out of the moment. Relieved for a second, Aura immediately turns fierce again and yells up at the VIP box for Mare to stop hiding from Ains. Mare finally calls back in a shaky voice that he will come down by the stairs, but Aura snaps that Ains should not be kept waiting. Pressed into action, Mare forces himself to jump from the box instead. Mare lands awkwardly and wobbles, nothing like Aura's smooth stop, but he still manages to absorb the impact without getting hurt. He hurries across the arena toward Ains, yet even at full speed he is much slower than his twin. Aura frowns and barks at him to move faster, and Mare can only stammer out a frightened yes. When Mare finally reaches Ains, the resemblance makes it obvious that he and Aura are twins, but his whole mood is the exact opposite of hers. Ains is struck by how vividly both children show emotion, because NPC settings were never supposed to shape personality this completely. That thought makes Ains remember Bukubo Kagama, the guildmate who created these two dark elves, and he quietly wishes she could have seen them now. Mare bows his head and apologizes for making Ains wait, only daring to glance up nervously afterward. Now that Mare is close, his outfit makes the difference between the twins even clearer. Aura is the aggressive hunter, while Mare is a much more delicate staff user. Ains looks over both 6th floor guardians, seeing Aura stand proudly while Mare nearly folds under his stare. The sight moves Ains, and he silently acknowledges the twins as proof of his old friend's work brought to life. He finally welcomes them, saying he is glad to see both of them doing well. Aura answers with her usual energy and admits the 6th floor has been boring enough that she would actually welcome a few intruders. Mare nervously admits he does not want to face intruders because they scare him. Aura lets out a tired sigh, asks Mamanga to excuse her, and orders Mare to come with her. After Mamanga agrees, Aura grabs Mare by the tip of his ear and drags him away as he complains that it hurts. Aura leans in and starts scolding Mare in a whisper, and even from far away Mamanga can tell she is seriously chewing him out. Watching them from a distance, Mamanga quietly admits to himself that he also does not want to meet intruders until he has time to prepare properly. When Mamanga focuses again, Mare is already down on his knees while Aura keeps berating him without mercy. The sight makes Mamanga smile because it reminds him of the guild friends who created the twins and the way those siblings used to act. That memory leads Mamanga to a heavier question. Aura and Mare should both have died during the old invasion that reached the 8th floor, so what does death mean for them now? He reviews Yggdrasil's rules and remembers that death normally costs 5 levels and 1 equipped item, while very low-level non-player characters would vanish completely. He also recalls that resurrection magic or paid items could reduce the penalty, and Nazarik's NPCs were supposed to come back cleanly as long as the guild paid the cost. Since players sometimes even use death on purpose to lower levels and rebuild their characters, Mamanga knows death in Yggdrasil was harsh, but not always final or terrifying. Even with those rules in mind, Mamanga still cannot tell whether Aura and Mare are truly the same people after being brought back. He wants to ask Aura about that old battle, but he stops himself because the huge invasion might have left painful memories he should not dig into lightly. In the end, Mamanga decides to leave the question alone for now and only ask after he has dealt with the many problems piling up around him. While Aura keeps lecturing Mare, Mamanga quietly shelves one darker question for later. If this world is no longer a normal game, even death itself might not work the way Yggdrasil used to. Feeling sorry for Mare, Mamanga finally steps in and tells Aura that this has gone far enough. Mamanga calms Aura without humiliating her, saying her frustration makes sense, but what matters is that she and Mare would fight without hesitation if Nazarick were ever attacked. Then he physically helps Mare up and reframes the whole thing, telling him he should appreciate a sister harsh enough to worry about him that much. Mare actually looks at Aura differently for a second, and Aura immediately flusters and blurts out that she was not trying to impress Mamanga. Mamanga lets Aura off the hook and makes his position clear. Whatever her motive was, he is not dissatisfied with Mare as a guardian. Aura and Mare bow at once to thank him, and their shining, adoring eyes make Mamanga so uncomfortable that he hides it behind a stiff cough. Trying to change the subject, Mamanga brings up Aura's earlier complaint about being bored because no intruders ever reach this floor. When Aura reacts like she is about to be punished, Mamanga quickly reassures her that he only wants an honest answer. Aura admits it is true, just a little, because there is no one in Nazarick who can last more than 5 minutes against her in a fight. Mamanga tests the obvious answer and asks if Mare could be her sparring partner instead. That suggestion terrifies Mare on the spot, and even Aura can only answer with a weary sigh when she sees how badly he recoils. As Aura sighs, a sweet scent suddenly spreads through the air, and Mamanga instantly recognizes it as part of her ability instead of an ordinary fragrance. Remembering how unnatural Albedo's scent had already felt in this now physical world, Mamanga instinctively steps back from Aura's lingering aroma too. Aura catches his reaction at once, apologizes in alarm, and hurriedly waves the scent away before it can bother him further. Mamanga starts by sorting out Aura's support skills, realizing her beast tamer abilities can spread through the air around her and reach anyone standing nearby. What bothers him is that this world gives him no status icons, so he cannot tell at a glance whether Aura's buff or debuff is affecting him. Aura quickly tells him she already cancelled the effect, trying to calm the situation before it gets worse. She awkwardly adds that mind-affecting effects should not work on an undead like him anyway, leaning on what the old game rules used to say. Mamanga asks the key question anyway: was he actually standing inside her skills range? Aura admits he was, and both twins immediately duck their heads like they are bracing for punishment. Seeing how frightened they are, Mamanga forces his voice gentle and tells Aura he is not angry, only trying to understand how her ability works. The reassurance works at once, and Aura snaps back with an energetic yes as relief floods her face. That reaction hits Mamanga harder than the skill did, because he realizes his mere presence scares Aura this much. He quietly buries the panic that follows, refusing to dwell on the fear that something about him, or this world, may be changing for the worse. To keep things practical, he asks Aura what effect she had used on him in the first place. Aura answers that the skill's effect was fear, which makes Mamanga pause because he did not feel frightened at all. Mamanga first guesses the old guild rules should have blocked it, since allies in Yggdrasil were not supposed to affect each other that way. Aura and Mare both stare at him in surprise, making it obvious that they do not think that rule applies here anymore. When Mamanga asks if he is mistaken, Aura carefully corrects him and says he may be confusing it with a separate skill that lets users adjust an ability's range. That answer forces Mamanga to accept a bigger change. The old no friendly fire rule may be gone, and Mare's safety might come from his own equipment instead. He narrows the mystery down to two options: either his own stats resisted Aura's fear effect, or his undead nature still makes him immune to it. Since he cannot tell which is true, Mamanga decides to test it properly and asks Aura to try a different effect. Aura tilts her head in open confusion at the request, and the oddly innocent reaction makes Mamanga think of a puppy. On impulse, Mamanga reaches out and gently pets Aura's head, and her soft hair only encourages him to keep going. But when he notices Mare staring in alarm from the side, Mamanga finally stops, suddenly wondering what the shy twin is thinking. After a brief thought, Mamanga releases his staff and reaches over to ruffle Mare's hair too, evening out the moment between the twins. After fussing over the twins for a moment, Mamanga finally remembers why he came and tells Aura and Mare he needs their help with some experiments. Aura perks right up and eagerly accepts, clearly happy he trusted her with the task. Mamanga stops her there, because before anything else, he wants to test one of Nazarick's powers himself. He grips the floating staff of Ainzel Gown and focuses on one jewel, the divine class gem of the moon. The staff answers his command and summons 3 moonlight wolves out of thin air. The effect looks just like Yggdrasil, but this time Mamanga can also feel the master-servant bond linking him to the summoned beasts. Aura eyes the wolves in confusion, because creatures this weak make no sense beside someone as strong as Mamanga. Mamanga confirms it, and tells Aura to use her skill on an area that includes him too. Aura hesitates at the idea of targeting him, but Mamanga pushes firmly enough that she obeys. He is not being reckless for no reason. Since this world may not follow game rules anymore, Manga needs a direct test to see whether Aura's ability still works properly at all. Aura exhales several times to spread the skill, but Manga feels absolutely nothing, no matter how he tries to sense a change. The answer shows up behind him instead. One Moonlight Wolf is clearly affected, proving Aura's skill did activate after all. That settles the experiment. The skill works, but mind-affecting effects simply do not work on Manga. With that result in hand, Manga starts connecting it to his old Yggdrasil race data and the many innate abilities an overlord is supposed to have. After reviewing the results, Manga concludes that his undead body still keeps all its old racial traits, from broad immunities to holy and fire weaknesses. Satisfied with the test, Manga thanks Aura and asks if she is all right after helping him confirm it. Aura says she is fine, and Manga immediately dismisses the 3 Moonlight Wolves. With the summons gone, Aura asks if Manga came to their floor just to run those experiments, while Mare quietly nods beside her. Manga corrects her and admits he actually came here to train. That answer stuns both twins, because hearing the ruler of Nazareth say he needs training feels almost unbelievable. Manga gives a quick, firm confirmation, clearly prepared for exactly this reaction. The moment the staff strikes the floor, Aura suddenly realizes what he is holding and stares at it with fresh awe. Aura blurts out a reverent question, asking if this is the highest class weapon that only Manga can wield. Manga is briefly thrown by the wording, but Mare's shining eyes make it clear the twins are asking out of pure admiration. So Manga answers proudly that this is the staff of Ain's old gown, created together with his guildmates. When he raises it higher, the staff floods the arena with beautiful light, while ominous shadows flicker around it, making its power impossible to miss. Now fully carried away, Manga starts boasting that each of the 7 gems is a divine class artifact, and that collecting the full set took a brutal amount of work. He keeps going, bragging that the completed staff exceeds normal divine class gear and can nearly rival a world-class item. Manga even begins explaining the staff's automatic combat function, then abruptly coughs and realizes he has been showing off too much. Ains is bursting with pride over the staff of Ain's old gown, but he forces himself to stop gloating before he embarrasses himself in front of the twins. Aura and Mare stare at the staff in open awe, and their admiration almost makes Ains lose his cool on the spot. Keeping up his ruler act, Ains says he wants to run experiments with the staff and asks the twins to help him. The twins agree immediately, and Aura eagerly asks if they can see the staff's power for themselves. Ains grandly agrees and promises to show them just a fraction of the power of the mighty staff that only he can wield. Aura practically bounces with excitement, and even shy Mare cannot hide how thrilled he is. Their reaction nearly breaks Ain's stern facade again, so he has to remind himself to stay dignified. Ains adds that he has already summoned the other guardians, and they will be arriving within the hour. Aura starts worrying they need to prepare for the meeting, but Ains stops her and orders both twins to stay here and wait. When Aura realizes all the guardians means shelter too, her mood drops immediately. Ains confirms that every guardian is coming, and Aura lets out a miserable sigh while Mare takes it much better. Watching the twins, Ains figures Aura's bad blood with shelter comes from her settings, while Mare was likely never meant to clash with her the same way. Ains can only sigh and wonder what kind of trouble this guardian gathering is about to bring. The story cuts to a company of 50 mounted men racing across wide grassy plains on patrol. Among them, one rider stands out at once, Gazef Stranov, the Riestei's kingdom's famed warrior captain. Gazef's vice captain says they are almost at the first village on their route, but Gazef sees no village ahead and his unease deepens. He answers calmly, but inside he is pushing down rising dread as he keeps his horse at a pace that will not break it. They have ridden hard all the way from the royal capital, and both Gazef and his mount are starting to feel the fatigue. The vice captain quietly says he hopes the villagers are safe, and Gazef shares the same grim fear. That fear comes from the king's urgent order. Imperial knights were reported at the border, and if the report was true, Gazef was to wipe them out immediately. As Gazef rides hard across the border plains, he knows the kingdom should have sent more help, because his company is one of the few forces that can stand against Imperial knights. They could have rushed in other troops to shield the villages until stronger forces arrived, but Gazef knows those options were deliberately left unused. Gazef's vice captain finally blurts out what everyone is thinking and asks why they are searching alone instead of calling the warrior band and adventurers from Irantal. Gazef shuts him down at first, warning that even speaking openly about Imperial knights inside the kingdom could become dangerous if the wrong ears heard it. The vice captain presses anyway, pointing out there is no one around and asking the truth with a bitter little smile. Then he says the real culprit out loud, the nobles. Gazef's silence is answer enough, and the vice captain erupts in disgust at nobles who treat lives like pieces in a power struggle and use disaster in the king's lands to attack the crown. Gazef quietly pushes back that not every noble is like that. The vice captain concedes there are rare exceptions like the Golden Princess, but says almost no one else truly cares about the people. His frustration spills over into a dangerous wish. If the kingdom had a dictator, they could ignore the nobles and actually protect the people. Gazef immediately warns that crushing the nobles by force could spark civil war, and with the empire already threatening the kingdom, ordinary people would suffer even more. The vice captain knows Gazef is right, but his anger still hangs there unresolved. Gazef tries to end the argument, but his voice dies the moment he sees what is ahead. Beyond the hill, thick black smoke is already climbing into the sky in several columns, and every rider understands exactly what that means. Gazef clicks his tongue and drives his horse forward, abandoning talk for speed. When they reach the village, their fear is confirmed. The place is already a graveyard of blackened earth and burned houses standing like tombstones. Gazef hardens his voice and orders everyone to move quickly through the ruins. Inside the village, only burned frames remain, and the air itself is foul with blood and ash. Gazef walks through the destruction with a face so calm it becomes its own kind of fury, and his vice-captain wears the same numb, bitter resolve beside him. Gazef takes in the full horror of the raid. A village of more than 100 people has been reduced to just 6 survivors, with even women and infants butchered. He orders his vice-captain to send some men back and escort the survivors to Urantal instead of leaving them in the ruins. The vice-captain immediately objects, because moving the survivors now could be exactly what the enemy wants. Gazef admits the risk but refuses to abandon the wounded villagers, both because it is the king's duty to protect this land and because he cannot leave them to die. The vice-captain presses harder, warning that the survivors already saw Imperial Knights, so the king's first objective is met, and they should retreat to Urantal before walking into the next trap. Gazef cuts him off with a flat no, making it clear he has no intention of withdrawing. The vice-captain spells out the trap. The attack happened too neatly after Gazef arrived, and the enemy likely left survivors alive on purpose to split his strength. Even after hearing the logic, Gazef quietly confirms that he still means to go on. That answer rattles the vice-captain, who reminds Gazef that even his strength has limits against the Empire's best fighters and that the kingdom cannot afford to lose him. When retreat fails, the vice-captain offers a colder plan: leave the survivors behind and pursue the enemy at full strength. Gazef admits that plan is strategically sound, but saying it out loud means accepting that the survivors will almost certainly die on their own. The vice-captain cannot deny it, because without protection those villagers will not last more than a few days. Still, he forces himself to say the ugliest truth of all: Gazef's life is worth far more than a handful of villagers. Gazef understands how much it cost his subordinate to say that, and the guilt only makes his refusal feel heavier. He answers by reminding the vice-captain that both of them were born commoners, not nobles looking down on village lives from a distance. The vice-captain answers at once that he joined the army because he admired Gazef, showing this argument is coming from loyalty, not cowardice. Gazef presses the point and asks if he was born in a village too, forcing the debate back to the people they are talking about abandoning. The vice-captain admits it, but his answer trails off because he already knows where Gazef is leading him. Gazef lays out the reality of village life: people that live close to death, and a single monster attack can wipe out everything they have. The vice-captain can only admit that Gazef is right. Gazef keeps going, saying that when monsters strike and a village cannot afford adventurers, ordinary people have no choice but to hide and pray the danger passes. Gazef forces the vice-captain to admit the bitter truth: when weak villages pray for rescue, help often never comes. So Gazef makes his choice. If their own lords failed these people, his men will prove the strong can still step in and save them. Gazef pushes even harder, saying the survivors deserve to see real heroes risk themselves for the weak instead of hiding behind excuses. Moved by that resolve, the vice-captain offers to take the dangerous role himself because losing Gazef would cost the kingdom far more. Gazef flatly refuses, insisting his own odds are better and reminding him they are here to save lives, not throw them away. In the end, the vice-captain swallows his objections and accepts Gazef's command. Gazef orders him to choose an escort and get the villagers to Urantal, splitting the company so at least the survivors can be saved. As the sun drops, the scene cuts to the real threat. 45 armed men materialize on the plains near the ruined village. Their equipment makes it obvious they are no ordinary mercenaries but a covert force backed by serious power and money. They stare over the massacre without a hint of shock, treating the blood and fire like routine work. One of them says the prey got away, and his disappointment reveals the massacre was only part of a larger plan. The commander calmly explains the trap: they will keep burning villages until they lure Gazef, the beast, exactly where they want him. Then he orders the next target to be shown to him, making it clear more innocent villages are about to be used as bait. With that grim reveal hanging in the air, the story jumps away to Mamanga in an arena, calmly aiming a spell at a straw target. In the arena, Ains admits to himself that raw damage magic was never his strength. His build focused on necromancy and instant death magic with added effects, which made him awkward against non-living targets like this one. Even among casters, Ains knows his spell damage falls short of specialists built purely for combat magic. Then he glances aside and sees Aura and Mare staring at him with sparkling excitement, which only makes him more uneasy. Ains worries, a little awkwardly, about whether he can actually live up to those expectations. He shifts his eyes to the 2 giant dragonkin nearby, checking the monsters Aura has under control in the Colosseum. The dragonkin are huge, wingless dragon humanoids with steel-hard scales, thick tails, and monstrous arms built for brute force. They are only level 55 and not especially tricky, but their raw stamina and power let them fight above that weight. Ains lets out a quiet sigh and turns back to the straw men, pulling himself away from the distractions. Being watched so hopefully bothers him because this experiment is really about one thing: finding out if he can still use magic at all. He also brought the twins here on purpose, because he wants the Guardians to see his power before the others arrive. If they understand how overwhelming he is, opposing Ains will never even feel like an option. Ains does not think Aura and Mare look disloyal now, but that confidence vanishes the moment he imagines himself powerless. Aura treats him with easy familiarity, but for Ains this is still their first real meeting, which makes the gap feel dangerous. He can see the twins as the loving work of his old guildmates, but that does not prove their design is flawless. Because they can think for themselves now, Ains starts wondering where cracks in their judgment might appear. His fear sharpens into a brutal question. If they were not made to obey the weak, what happens when they realize he has no power? From there his mind goes darker, to the possibility that the Guardians might not just ignore him, but betray their own guild master. Ains reins himself in, deciding that blind trust is foolish, but drowning in doubt is no better. He cuts off the worry with a simple decision to deal with that problem later and focus on the test in front of him now. And if the result is bad, he has already decided on a backup plan. He can at least turn to Aura and Mare and talk through what comes next. Ains quietly congratulates himself because the staff test gave him perfect cover. If his own magic failed, Aura and Mare would still think he only came to prove the staff's power. He pushes aside that self-satisfied moment and refocuses on the real problem, finding out whether he can still cast Yggdrasil magic here. With hundreds of spells memorized, Ains thinks through the test carefully and decides an area spell will tell him more than a single target shot now that friendly fire rules may be gone. There are no touchable game icons anymore, so Ains gambles that magic must be drawn out from inside himself instead. That instinct works, and a spell icon appears before him like a response from his own body. The moment he feels the spell data in full, Ains is thrilled. This magic does not feel like clicking a game command anymore, it feels like his own power. He channels that excitement into a test cast and points at the strawman, saying, "Fireball." A globe of flame slams into the target exactly as he expected, and the blast turns the strawman and the ground around it into a brief sea of fire. When the flames clear, only a blackened ruin is left, and Ains lets out a smug little laugh while the twins stare, completely lost but impressed. Without explaining himself, Ains orders another target, and Aura instantly snaps into action to carry out his request. One of Aura's Dragakin obeys at once and places a fresh strawman right beside the burned remains of the first one. Ains circles the new target like a researcher checking an experiment before choosing his next spell. He casts Napalm, and a pillar of fire erupts right beside the strawman to engulf it from the side. After a short wait, he follows up with another fireball and blasts the burnt remains into drifting ash. That second test confirms two key rules for Ains. The recast delay is unchanged from Yggdrasil, but the actual act of casting is even faster here than it was in the game. Pleased with the result of his magic test, Manga says it was perfect and calmly prepares his next experiment. Aura offers to bring more strawmen, still treating the display like an ordinary show of strength, but Manga refuses because he wants to test something more important. He casts Message next, shifting from showing power to checking whether this world can still connect him to anyone at all. Manga tries a GM first, but the spell behaves strangely, not connecting cleanly and not failing normally either, as if it is searching for something that is no longer there. When the call finally dies out with no response, the result hits him hard despite his composed posture. He tries again, this time calling one of his old comrades from Ains' old gown, clinging to a sliver of hope he already expects to lose. One by one he tries all 41 guild members, and every single call comes back empty. Manga had braced himself for this, but actually proving that none of his friends are reachable leaves him in quiet despair. At last he decides to contact Zebas, choosing someone inside Nazarick to test whether the spell only works within this new world. This time the message connects, proving the spell itself still works and making the earlier silence even more final. Zebas answers with deep respect, and Manga briefly imagines him bowing on the other end before catching himself. Zebas notices the silence and politely asks if something is wrong, pulling Manga out of his distracted thoughts. Manga apologizes for spacing out and immediately asks about the area around Nazarick, turning the call into a field report. Zebas reports that Nazarick is surrounded by plains and that he sees no intelligent creatures nearby. That answer shocks Manga, because Nazarick should have been beside a poisonous swamp filled with frog-like demihumans, not open grassland. When Zebas confirms it again, Manga can no longer ignore the scale of what has happened. He grimly pieces it together, and says the great underground tomb of Nazarick must have been transported somewhere else entirely. To test the idea further, he asks Zebas whether anything is floating in the sky or whether some message appeared, searching for any sign of a system event behind this change. Zebas says there is no message at all, only a vast sky like the night sky on Nazarick's 6th floor, and that detail jolts Manga even more. Still trying to find anything familiar, Manga asks one last time if there is anything suspicious nearby. Zebas answers that there is nothing unusual and no other structures in sight beyond Nazarick itself, leaving Manga with only the bleak certainty that they are truly somewhere else. Ains wrestles with the ugly answer he already suspects, then realizes Zebas is waiting for orders and forces himself to act. He orders Seabass to return in 20 minutes, go straight to the Colosseum, and report everything to the assembled guardians himself. Ains adds one more command before ending the spell. Seabass should gather as much information as he can on the way back. Once the message ends, Ains is ready to breathe again, but Aura and Mare are still staring at him, waiting for the staff test he promised. So Ains grips the staff of Ains' old gown and decides that if he is going to demonstrate it, he might as well make it spectacular. He casts Summon Primal Fire Elemental, and the fire gem in the staff answers with a burst of violent power. The light explodes into a roaring tornado of fire, a towering inferno wide enough to swallow the arena's open space in heat and glare. The heat is so brutal that the dragon can move to shield the twins, while Ains alone stands in the scorching wind without a scratch. Then the cyclone tightens and takes shape, revealing a humanoid primal fire elemental at the peak of the summon. Ains immediately feels the same obedient link he had with the Moonlight Wolves, confirming this level 85 summon is under his control. Aura stares at the top-tier elemental in open amazement, thrilled by a summon even she cannot produce. Seeing that reaction, Ains casually asks if she wants to fight it. Aura freezes for a beat, then breaks into an eager grin that is a lot more dangerous than childish, while Mare smiles much more softly beside her. When Aura asks if she really can, Ains tells her not to hold back because destroying this summon will not cost him much. Mare tries to slip away with a flimsy excuse, but Aura immediately calls him out and grabs his arm before he can run. Aura's smile freezes Mare on the spot, and she drags her brother straight in front of the towering elemental. Mare throws Ains a desperate look for help, but Ains only claps, and Mare's last bit of hope dies on the spot. Ains bluntly orders the twins to do their best and warns them not to blame him if they get hurt. Aura answers with bright confidence, while Mare's tiny reply makes it clear he wants no part of this test. Trusting that Mare can keep them alive, Ains uses his link to the summon and orders the primal fire elemental to attack for real. When the blazing monster closes in, the twins fall into formation with Aura on the front line and Mare backing her up from behind. Aura attacks at close range with her whip, and Mare follows with magic, turning the fight into a clean one-sided beatdown. Seeing how easily the twins handle it, Ains decides the battle no longer needs his full attention. With his spells and equipped items already confirmed, Ains moves on to a more important question: whether his stored magic tools still exist in this world. Because he hoarded consumables in Yggdrasil instead of spending them, Ains knows his stockpile should be enormous if it survived the transfer. That leaves one uneasy mystery for Ains. If his game inventory was real, where did all of it go in this new world? He copies the motion from the game and pushes his hand into empty air, only to feel it sink through space like water. When Ains sweeps his hand aside, a window-like opening appears and reveals rows of beautifully crafted magic staves inside. He scrolls through the space and finds the rest of his hoard still there too, from scrolls and weapons to armor, gems, potions, and countless other items. The sight finally lets Ains relax, and he laughs in open relief now that his full stockpile is still within reach. With all those items available, Ains quietly realizes he can protect himself even if everyone in Nazarick turns against him. As Aura and Mare keep pressing the fight in the background, Ains starts weighing a deeper question about everything he has seen so far. Are these NPCs really just programs anymore? Ains realizes the people of Nazarick are not acting like scripted NPCs anymore, because their thoughts and emotions feel completely human. That leaves him with a bigger fear. He still cannot tell whether this place is Yggdrasil somehow made real, or an entirely different world. Since his old powers still work, Ains decides the Nazarick monsters and NPCs are probably not his enemies, at least for now. But if those beings are truly alive, he knows he cannot treat them like data anymore. So he settles on a survival strategy: hide his confusion and keep acting like an absolute ruler with stern, flawless dignity. With no clear answers yet, Ains decides his next move is simple and cautious: gather information little by little before doing anything reckless. His thoughts drift to the real world, and he admits the painful truth that there is no family, lover, or warm life waiting for him there. Even so, Ains decides he should not throw that option away, because having a way back might still matter in a world this uncertain. Left with no easy answer, he finally lets out a quiet, honest murmur: "What should I do?" Then the scene shifts back to the combat test as the massive primal fire elemental begins to melt away, and the brutal heat finally starts to ease. As the summon vanishes completely, Ains feels his control link to it thin out and disappear like smoke. Looking over the fight, Ains concludes that Aura had handled the elemental almost perfectly as a frontline counter to its flames and heavy attacks. He also sees how crucial Mare was, quietly backing her up with buffs and debuffs so the fight never slipped out of control. Their teamwork feels so sharp and real that Ains is struck again by how different this world is from an ordinary game battle. Genuinely impressed, Ains praises them for putting on a spectacular display. The twins light up under that praise, clearly happy that their hard work earned his approval. Aura answers first with cheerful pride, saying it has been a while since they had to work this hard. Even while they smile, the heat is still intense enough that wiping away the sweat does nothing for long. Madamada quietly opens his inventory and takes out a pitcher of endless water, even though an undead body like his does not need to drink. He pours the cold water into 2 fine glasses and offers them to Aura and Mare himself. The twins immediately try to refuse, saying it feels wrong and that Mare can make water with magic anyway. Mamanga gently brushes off their hesitation and tells them to accept it as thanks for always doing well. That simple praise hits hard, and both twins go red-eared as they shyly accept the glasses. They thank him like they have been given something precious, making Mamanga realize how much this small kindness means to them. Even the way they drink shows their different personalities, with Aura gulping hers down fast while Mare sips carefully. Watching them drink makes Mamanga touch his own throat and confront the fact that his body no longer feels human. He tests his body with his fingers and finds only bone where skin, blood, nerves, and organs should be, and the unreality of it still bothers him. His touch feels strangely dulled, but his other senses seem sharper, and his bones feel tougher than steel. More unsettling still, part of him already accepts this white-boned form as his real body, which is why he feels no fear. He breaks the silence by offering a second helping, raising the pitcher and asking if either twin wants more. Aura declines first, and when Mamanga turns to Mare directly, the shy boy panics and hurriedly says he is fine too. Mamanga accepts their answer, takes back the glasses, and puts the pitcher and cups away into his pocket space. With the mood now warmer, Aura leans in and quietly admits she had expected Mamanga to be much scarier. Mamanga starts to answer carefully, but Aura blurts out that how he is now is best, stopping him in his tracks. He awkwardly agrees to leave it at that, still a little thrown by her intensity. Then Aura quietly asks if they are the only ones he treats this kindly, revealing how special this moment feels to her. Mamanga cannot find the right answer, so he settles for a gentle pat on Aura's head instead. Aura beams with eager delight, while Mare looks openly jealous beside her. A young-sounding formal voice speaks, and a spreading shadow on the ground reshapes itself into a door. From that shadow door, Shelter steps out in a lavish black gown, pale as wax and stunningly beautiful. Aura immediately snaps at Shelter for using gate inside Nazarick when she could have just walked. Her tone is so icy that Mare starts trembling and slowly edges away from his own sister. Even Mamanga is taken aback by how completely Aura's playful mood vanished. Shelter ignores Aura's glare completely and walks straight toward Mamanga. A strong sweet perfume drifts with Shelter, and Aura reacts with open disgust. Aura jabs that Shelter smells rotten because she is undead, and Mamanga reflexively checks whether she means him too. Shelter objects at once, reminding Aura that Mamanga is undead too. Aura refuses that comparison and insists Mamanga is something far above an ordinary undead, almost like a godly one. Mamanga inwardly slumps because, by the game rules he knows, he should just be a normal undead. Mare timidly suggests Aura's wording went too far, so she awkwardly rephrases the insult into something blunter but safer. After Mare gives that revised version a reluctant pass, Shelter closes in on Mamanga and gently cradles his head with both hands. With open adoration, Shelter calls Mamanga her beloved master and the only one she cannot control. Shelter tries to drape herself over Ains like a sultry beauty, but her tiny youthful frame makes the whole act look awkward instead of mature. Ains wants to retreat from the sudden intimacy, but he forces himself to hold still and quietly wonder if this embarrassing personality is really how Shelter was made. Thinking of her creator, Pero Roncino, Ains grimly realizes Shelter's shameless design probably makes perfect sense. The scene shifts from awkward to hostile when Aura growls for Shelter to stop, and Shelter finally turns her attention to her. Shelter mocks Aura's height so casually that even Ains decides there is nothing worth defending in what she just said. Then Shelter tries to provoke Aura even harder by turning to Mare and insulting Aura as a weirdo sister he should abandon. Mare immediately goes pale, because he can tell Shelter is using him as bait to start a real fight. But Aura does not explode right away. She smiles first, which makes her answer feel even more dangerous. Aura drops one brutal line and calls Shelter's chest fake, instantly blowing up the whole exchange. The hit lands so cleanly that Ains can practically see Shelter's elegant lady act shatter on the spot. Aura presses the attack, bluntly saying Shelter stuffed her chest with pads and made it look unnatural. Shelter flails in panic instead of denying it cleanly, and that frantic reaction only makes Aura's suspicion look correct. Aura pokes at Shelter's chest and keeps teasing, even guessing that was why Shelter used gate instead of running carefully with everything stuffed in there. Cornered and furious, Shelter snaps back that Aura has nothing to show off herself and desperately tries to turn the body insult around. Aura does not even flinch, and Shelter instinctively stumbles back while covering her own chest like she already knows she is losing. Aura calmly finishes her worst insult by saying she is only 76 and still has time to grow, while Shelter as an undead will never change again. That living versus undead jab hits hardest of all, and Shelter reels in frustrated silence while Aura's smile turns almost frightening. When Aura adds one last dismissive jab about Shelter being proud of that chest, Shelter finally breaks and erupts into a full threat. Shelter lets black mist boil off her hands while Aura tightens her grip on her whip, and the argument between them looks one step away from turning into a real fight. Watching from the side, Mamanga is speechless because the petty clash feels strangely familiar, like an old guild quarrel brought back to life. The scene reminds Mamanga of how Pero Roncino and Bukabukagama used to bicker like close siblings, so for a moment, he just stands there lost in memories of his old friends. That nostalgia breaks the instant a flat, inhuman voice cuts through the arena and shuts both girls up. Mamanga turns and sees Cocytus, the 5th floor guardian, a huge insect-like warrior wrapped in freezing air and armed like a walking armory. Cocytus slams his halberd into the floor and cold spreads from the impact as he orders them to control themselves in front of a supreme being. Even after being called out, Shaltir and Aura still try to blame each other, while Mare can only panic beside them. Mamanga finally steps in for real and ends the whole thing with a curt order that their playtime is over. His words hit instantly, and Shaltir and Aura both jolt before bowing their heads together in a perfectly synchronized apology. Mamanga accepts that at once and turns to Cocytus, acknowledging that he came when summoned. Cocytus answers in his clipped monotone that he came immediately, and his breath is so cold the moisture in the air freezes around him. The cold around Cocytus is brutal enough to cause frostbite, but everyone here can shrug off that kind of elemental damage, so no one even flinches. Mamanga lightly teases him for sounding too available with no intruders around, testing the mood after the interruption. Cocytus agrees at first, but the rattling click of his mandibles makes it feel like he is answering with his own rough version of a laugh. Then he corrects the idea immediately and says he was not idle at all, because he still had duties to handle. That catches Mamanga's attention, so he asks what kind of work Cocytus meant. Cocytus reveals the answer plainly. He has been training so he can deploy at any moment, showing that even without enemies, Nazaric's guardians are preparing for war. In the Colosseum, Mamanga openly praises Cocytus, treating Nazaric's strongest weapon master with rare warmth after his hard work. Cocytus answers in his heavy broken cadence that praise from Mamanga makes the task feel lighter, then notes that Demiurge and Albedo have arrived. Mamanga turns toward the entrance and sees Albedo coming in first, with a sharply dressed man following behind her like an attendant. Once she reaches him, Albedo smiles and bows deeply to Mamanga, making her loyalty unmistakable. The man behind her also bows and politely apologizes for making everyone wait. Up close, Demiurge looks like a calm professional, but his metal-sheathed tail and black flames make the evil aura impossible to miss. This is Demiurge, guardian of the 7th floor and Nazaric's defense commander among the NPCs. With the group assembled, Mamanga says it looks like everyone is here. Demiurge immediately corrects him and says 2 more people have not arrived, his voice carrying that unsettling natural authority of command mantra. That skill could dominate weak minds, but here among Nazaric's top guardians it only makes Demiurge sound even more compelling. Mamanga refuses to summon the last 2 floor guardians, saying they should only be moved in special situations. Demiurge accepts the decision at once and falls silent. Then Mamanga adds that his allies still have not arrived yet, and the room instantly goes awkward. Aura and Shelter freeze, and even Albedo's perfect smile locks up when they realize he means someone outside the Guardian lineup matters to him. Flustered, Albedo hurriedly explains that Kyuhuku is only an area guardian under their supervision, not a floor guardian equal to them. Shaltir and Aura back Albedo up with stiff smiles, trying to smooth over the misunderstanding without sounding jealous. Mamanga follows the explanation, remembers Kyuhuku is an area guardian, and decides the other area guardians should be informed too. He names area guardians like Guren and Grant as examples and assigns the floor guardians to deliver the order down the chain. The distinction becomes clear: floor guardians rule whole floors, while the many area guardians each watch over a smaller domain beneath them. After the floor guardians show they understand, Albedo steps in to issue the next command. Albedo calls on the guardians to formally pledge their loyalty, and before Ains can stop them, they line up in strict order with deadly serious faces. Shelter steps out first, names herself as guardian of the first 3 floors, and kneels like she is standing before an absolute ruler. Next comes Cocytus, the massive 5th floor guardian, lowering himself in the same vassal-like pose with heavy formality. Aura and Mare follow together, each introducing themselves as a 6th floor guardian and kneeling with the exact same drilled precision. Demiurge advances with calm dignity and offers his own formal submission, turning the ceremony even more serious. Albedo kneels last, but as guardian overseer she also gives the report. Everyone is present except Gargantua and Victim, and all of them now offer Ains their utmost loyalty. Ains stares at the 6 lowered heads and freezes, because the crushing weight of their devotion leaves him with no idea how a ruler is supposed to answer. His confusion sets off one of Ains' passive undead effects by accident, and a sinister black aura blooms behind him at the worst possible moment. Panicking inside, Ains desperately searches his memory for some king-like line to say and finally orders them to raise their heads. The guardians obey in perfect unison, and their flawless synchronization makes Ains realize just how completely they are treating him as their master. Ains cautiously thanks them for gathering, trying to sound worthy of the role that just fell onto his shoulders. Albedo answers immediately that thanks are unnecessary, because to every guardian here Ains is not just a boss but their supreme overlord. With all 6 silently backing Albedo's words, Ains keeps a stern face, but inside he feels the full choking weight of leadership and hesitates over every order he might give next. Ains is still quietly shaken by one fear: if he makes the wrong call, he could drag Nazarick itself to ruin. Seeing his doubt, Albedo drops her smile and answers with firm respect, saying it is natural for him to question servants as small as them. Then Albedo vows that if Ains commands it, every guardian will carry out any task with everything they have and never disgrace their creators. The whole line of guardians answers at once, swearing together with such force that Ain's old fear of betrayal is crushed on the spot. That oath hits Ain's hard, and the gloom inside him clears as he realizes the works his old friends created are still here, still magnificent, and still loyal. Reassured at last, Ain steps back into his role as guild master and tells the guardians to listen carefully because Nazarick is facing an unknown crisis. He lays out the core problem plainly. Nazarick is no longer in the swamp it used to occupy, but in the middle of a vast plain, and he asks if anyone predicted this. Albedo checks the other guardians with a glance, reads the same answer on every face, and reports that none of them knows what caused it. With no explanation yet, Ain shifts to damage control and asks each floor guardian whether anything strange has happened on their own floor. The answers come back in sequence, and every report says the same thing: their floors show no abnormalities. Since 2 floors still need confirmation, Albedo immediately volunteers to inspect the 4th and 8th floors herself. Ains accepts, but he gives one sharp warning: if something goes wrong on the 8th floor, even Albedo may not be able to handle it. Albedo bows deeply in acceptance, showing she understands both the order and the danger attached to it. Shalter quickly offers to take charge of the surface next, trying to move on the outside investigation. Ain stops her at once and reveals a key piece of information he had kept in reserve. Seabass is already scouting the surface. That last reveal catches the room off guard, and surprise finally breaks across the Guardians' otherwise controlled faces. Among Nazarick's close-range monsters, Seabass ranks with the very strongest, so the Guardians immediately grasp how grim things are when Ain sends even him out on plain reconnaissance. As the hall waits in silence, Ains quietly notes that Seabass should be back by now, and the whole room stays on edge for his report. Seabass finally jogs in, drops to one knee beside the other Guardians, and apologizes for returning late. Ains brushes off the delay and immediately asks for the full report on the area outside Nazarick. Before answering, Seabass glances at the other kneeling Guardians, and Ains makes it clear the situation is serious enough that they all need to hear this. Seabass reports the first hard fact: for about a kilometer in every direction, Nazarick is surrounded by nothing but open plain. He adds that he saw only small animals out there, with no humanoids and no large dangerous creatures at all. Ains presses him on one detail, asking whether those animals were monsters, but Seabass answers that they had no combat power whatsoever. Still testing whether this might somehow be Yggdrasil, Ains asks if the plains were covered in razor-like frozen grass, and Seabass says it was just ordinary grass. Ains asks one more time about sky castles or any artificial lights, and Seabass confirms there was nothing in the sky or on the land except a natural starry night. Ains thanks Seabass for the effort, but inwardly the answer stings because it gives him almost nothing useful to work with. That empty report still pushes Ains toward a bigger conclusion. This does not look like the game world of Yggdrasil anymore, even though his old gear and spells still work. Not knowing who brought Nazarick here or whose land this might be, Ains decides he has to treat the situation like a possible political and military threat. He orders every floor to raise its readiness by 1 level and warns the Guardians not to act carelessly while Nazarick's situation is still unclear. Then Ains adds an even stricter rule: if they find an intruder, they must capture them alive and do as little damage as possible. Knowing how demanding that order is, Ains actually apologizes for putting such limits on them at a moment like this. The Guardians answer in perfect unison, their synchronized obedience showing just how absolute Ains' authority is inside Nazarick. With immediate defense handled, Ains shifts to a new concern and asks Albedo how Nazarick actually manages security information between floors. The question matters because in the old game, these NPC Guardians should not have been able to coordinate like living administrators at all. Albedo calmly explains that each floor is run by its own Guardian, but Demiurge serves as overall defense commander, and everyone can pass information through him. That answer catches Ains off guard for a second, then he quietly nods, pleased to learn Nazarick is functioning more intelligently than he expected. In Nazarick's audience hall, Ains puts Demiurge and Albedo in charge of building a proper administrative system for the tomb. When Albedo asks whether that system should include the 8th, 9th, and 10th floors, Ains immediately draws a hard line around the 8th. Ains says the 8th floor stays under victim's control and no one enters without his direct permission, even canceling the broader access he had just granted Albedo. Instead, he orders the seal between floors changed so the 9th and 10th can be planned together as one security zone. That answer shocks Albedo, because to her the upper floors are the sacred domain of the supreme beings, not a place for common troops to walk through. Demiurge follows the same line of thought and bluntly questions whether even lowly spawn monsters should be allowed into the supreme being's own territory. Ains realizes their reverence is far stronger than his own, because he remembers those floors were left mostly empty for a practical reason, not because they were holy. So Ains settles it. This is an emergency, and the 9th and 10th floors will get extra hands for security. Demiurge yields at once and promises to assign only the strongest troops to that duty. With that settled, Ains turns to the Dark Elf twins and asks if Aura and Mare can hide the entire great underground tomb instead of relying on fragile illusions. The twins exchange a serious look and think it through before Mare hesitantly answers for them. Mare admits full magical concealment would be difficult, but suggests a rougher solution: bury the outer walls in mud and cover them with plants. Albedo cuts in at once, horrified that anyone would dare smear Nazarek's glorious walls with dirt. Her rebuke hits hard enough to make Mare visibly tremble, and the other guardians silently look like they agree with her. Ains thinks Albedo is taking this far too seriously, and he abruptly steps in before Mare gets crushed under that pressure. In a deep, forceful voice that even surprises him, Ains orders Albedo not to speak out of turn because he is addressing Mare. Albedo instantly collapses into a terrified apology, and the whole hall goes stiff as if Ains' warning might fall on any of them next. Even feeling a stab of guilt, Ains keeps his focus on Mare and asks him directly whether piling dirt over Nazarek's walls can really be done. Mare says yes if Ains permits it, but his hesitant pause shows there is still a complication he has not explained yet. Ains asks Seabass if any natural hills nearby could help hide Nazarek, but Seabass has to admit the land around them is completely flat. Seabass quickly adds one small advantage: since this world has night, they can at least try visual camouflage after dark. That gives Ains an opening, and he decides Mare's dirt and plants plan should work if their goal is simply to hide Nazarek's outer walls. Ains pushes the idea further and suggests piling up nearby earth into fake hills so Nazarek will blend into the flat landscape. Seabass agrees the disguise would work, giving Ains enough confidence to turn the rough idea into an official order. Ains assigns Aura and Mare to handle the earthworks together, and allows them to draw whatever supplies they need from every floor. He also closes the loophole in the plan, deciding that once the fake hills are finished, illusions will cover what can still be seen from the air. Mare stammers out his acceptance, clearly nervous but ready to obey. Ains knows the camouflage plan is still full of holes, but with their world turned upside down only hours ago, he decides rough answers are enough for now. He dismisses the meeting for the day and pointedly tells the Guardians not to overwork themselves while so much is still unknown. The Guardians answer with perfect unity, a silent reminder of just how completely they accept his authority. Before leaving, Ains asks one last unsettling question and starts with Shalter. What kind of person does she think he is? Shalter answers without hesitation, calling Ains the most beautiful being in the world and praising even his white body like a treasure beyond jewels. Ains moves to Cocytus, and Cocytus solemnly declares him stronger than every guardian and fully worthy of ruling Nazarek as supreme overlord. Aura's answer is simpler but no less serious. To her, Ains is a merciful leader with real foresight. When Ains turns to Mare, the shy boy calls him a very gentle person, saying it with obvious sincerity. Demiurge raises the praise another step, describing Ains as wise, decisive, and so deep that even his thoughts seem impossible to read. Seabass makes it more personal, thanking Ains as the one who gathered the supreme beings and, unlike the others, stayed behind instead of abandoning them. Albedo gives the most loaded answer of all, calling Ains the master above even the supreme beings and openly confessing that he is the man she loves most. After hearing them all, Ains accepts their views on the surface and tells the Guardians they will now inherit the duties once handled by his absent comrades. The Guardians bow again in full submission, and Ains ends the audience by teleporting away. In an instant, Ains leaves the ceremony hall and arrives alone in the chamber of the golems of Lemegeton, finally out of everyone else's sight. Once he confirms nobody is watching, Ains lets out a deep sigh and admits just how exhausted he really is. His body feels fine, but the pressure of acting like an all-knowing master has left him mentally drained. Now that he is alone, Ains can finally voice the thought he kept buried all meeting. Why do they think so absurdly highly of him? What shakes him most is that every guardian meant every word, leaving Ains alone with the uncomfortable truth that their worship is completely sincere. Left alone with his thoughts, Mamanga feels the pressure getting worse because he knows the Guardians expect a perfect ruler, and disappointing them now could shatter everything. What troubles him even more is Albedo, because the thought of facing her creator Tabula after altering her leaves Mamanga quietly panicking. Then the scene shifts back to the Guardians, right after the crushing force on their bodies suddenly disappears. Even after Mamanga leaves, the Guardians keep their foreheads near the floor until someone finally lets out a shaky sigh of relief. Albedo is the first to rise, brushing dirt from her wings and ignoring the stains on her white dress like they mean nothing beside Mamanga's presence. Once Albedo stands, the other Guardians slowly follow, but the room stays tense and hushed for a beat because nobody wants to speak first. Aura finally breaks the silence and admits the pressure was terrifying, while the others confess they felt like they were about to be crushed flat. Their fear quickly turns into awe as the Guardians start praising Mamanga's overwhelming presence as something far beyond their own power. What crushed them was Mamanga's despair aura, and this time the staff of Ain's old gown had boosted it enough to affect even level 100 NPCs. Instead of doubting him, the Guardians decide Mamanga released that aura as the authority of a ruler, only after they formally declared themselves his floor guardians. Cocytus backs that up in his halting way, saying Mamanga answered their loyalty with the true might of a master, and the others accept that explanation at once. Then Aura remembers that Mamanga was gentle with her and Mare before this, even giving them drinks when they were thirsty, and that one casual remark changes the whole mood again. The other Guardians instantly go rigid with jealousy, and Albedo takes it worst of all, clenching her trembling fists hard enough to strain her gloves. Mare suddenly blurts out that this must have been Mamanga's real power as ruler of Nazarek, and his earnest admiration neatly steers the conversation away from pure envy. Albedo immediately embraces that idea and declares that Mamanga answered their feelings by showing them his strength as the absolute ruler who stayed with them until the very end. That thought leaves the Guardians glowing with happiness, because nothing means more to them than feeling trusted by the creator they adore. For every being made by the Supreme Beings, the deepest wish is simple: help their creators, earn their trust, and be useful at their side. As the Guardians bask in serving the Supreme Beings, Seabass cuts through the happy mood and says he is leaving to stay at Mamanga-sama's side. Albedo clearly hates hearing that, but she forces herself to stay dignified and orders Seabass to serve Ains well and report to her at once if Ains calls for her. She keeps going, rambling that if Ains wants her in his bedchamber she only needs enough time to bathe, while Demiurge listens with a pained look from the side. Seabass cuts her off before the speech gets any longer, says lingering would disrespect Ains, and makes a brisk exit before Albedo can continue. After Seabass slips away, Demiurge notices the room has gone strangely quiet and turns his attention to Shelter, who is still kneeling there. Shelter slowly lifts her head with a dazed, half-awake look and blankly asks what happened. Then Shelter bluntly admits that Ains' overwhelming presence excited her so much that her underwear could not survive it. That confession freezes the whole group, and while the others can only stare in disbelief, Mare is just confused by what he is hearing. Albedo is the first one to snap, and her jealousy spills out in one cold insult when she calls Shelter a slut. Shelter instantly catches the hostility and answers with a taunting smile, saying Ains' beauty is a reward and anyone not turned on by it must be broken. She twists the knife further by mocking Albedo as a big-mouthed gorilla with no real desires, and Albedo fires back by calling her a lamprey. Now the whole room can feel this is no joke, because the two of them lock eyes so fiercely that the other Guardians start wondering if a fight is about to break out. The argument turns personal when Albedo demands to know whether Shelter is insulting the form the Supreme Beings gave her, and Shelter snaps that the same complaint applies to her own body too. Shelter rises to her feet, and neither of them looks away as they close the distance step by step. By the end of it, Albedo and Shelter are practically chest to chest, colliding as they glare straight into each other's eyes. Shelter sneers that Albedo should not get smug just because she can stay close to Mamanga. Albedo fires back that while Shelter is posted far away, she will claim a complete victory at Mamanga's side. When Shelter presses her on what that means, Albedo bluntly calls her a slut and makes the sexual rivalry completely explicit. Neither of them breaks eye contact, turning the argument into a silent dominance contest in the middle of the hall. Albedo suddenly unfurls her black wings as a threat, and Shelter answers by letting dark mist coil around her rather than show weakness. Seeing things about to get ugly, Demiurge casually tells Aura that disputes between women should be handled by another woman and tries to leave it to her. Aura immediately protests, but Demiurge keeps walking, making it clear he has no intention of getting between those two. Cocytus and Mare also step back, because nobody wants to be caught in Albedo and Shelter's fight. Aura grumbles that it is ridiculous to fight over something like this, but Demiurge says he is actually interested in how it turns out. When Aura asks what result he means, Demiurge calmly says it concerns Nazaric's future strength. Mare, completely lost, asks Demiurge to explain what he is talking about. For a moment Demiurge considers corrupting innocent Mare with adult knowledge, then drops the idea because he still sees the other creations of the Supreme Beings as comrades. Demiurge finally explains that any great ruler needs a successor, and if Mamanga ever leaves like the other Supreme Beings did, Nazaric would need an heir to serve. Mare takes the explanation literally and asks which one of them would become Mamanga's successor. Cocytus cuts in hard, insisting that as guardians their duty is to serve Mamanga faithfully so he never abandons them. Demiurge agrees with that loyalty, but he pushes the idea further and asks whether Cocytus would still want to swear himself to Mamanga's heir. That image instantly hooks Cocytus, and he starts imagining a future child of Mamanga as a young master he could proudly serve. In his mind, Cocytus is already carrying the child on his shoulders, teaching swordsmanship, and drawing his blade to protect him. By the end of the fantasy, Cocytus is so moved that he mutters about being an uncle, completely absorbed in the role. Even Demiurge looks away for a second, unable to fully deal with how sincere Cocytus has become. Then Demiurge returns to the cold logic behind it and says he is interested in what their children could add to Nazaric's power. He abruptly turns to Mare and asks, with perfect politeness, whether Mare wants to make a child. Mare can only stare back in stunned confusion, too overwhelmed to answer. Without missing a beat, Demiurge notes that Mare lacks a partner and calmly asks him to capture any humans, dark elves, wood elves, or similar races they find. Mare is left sputtering in panic, ending the exchange on a deeply awkward note. Mare shyly agrees to help if it benefits Mamanga-sama, but he blurts out the obvious problem first. He has no idea how he would even have children. Demiurge answers like it is just another practical task, saying he can teach Mare later and warning him not to experiment on his own or Mamanga-sama might be angry. That warning immediately lands on Mare, who remembers Nazaric's forces were carefully designed by a supreme being and says he definitely does not want to be scolded by Mamanga-sama. Demiurge agrees, but his mind keeps moving in a colder direction as he quietly wishes he could set up a breeding farm outside Nazaric instead. Then Demiurge brings up the other thing nobody had been teasing him about yet, and asks Mare why he is dressed like a girl. Embarrassed, Mare grabs at his miniskirt to hide his legs and explains that Byukubu Kagama-sama chose this outfit and called it a trap, so his gender should not matter. The moment Demiurge hears a supreme being approved it, his doubt vanishes, and he even starts wondering whether all boys should dress that way. Mare can only admit he has no idea, and the moment quietly shows how absolute the absent supreme being's authority still is inside Nazarick. Demiurge even considers bringing the idea to Mamanga-sama someday, then casually turns to Cocytus and tells him to wake up. Cocytus shakes himself awake and declares with complete sincerity that what he just saw was a beautiful sight straight out of his dreams. Demiurge brushes past that strange answer and checks on the bigger mess, asking whether Albedo and Shelter are finally done fighting. Neither rival answers cleanly, so a tired-looking Aura steps in from the side and says the fight has stopped, sort of. Aura starts to explain what they are arguing about now, and the answer is somehow worse. The two of them have moved on to who should be Mamanga-sama's first wife. Shelter doubles down at once, insisting the ruler of Nazarick obviously should not have only one wife and that the real question is who deserves the first position. Demiurge admits the topic is interesting, but he reins everyone back in and tells Albedo they should leave that fight for later because real work still needs to be assigned. Albedo instantly shifts back into her role as guardian overseer, tells Shelter they will settle this properly later, and Shelter agrees because nothing feels more important to her. With that, Albedo formally declares it is time to move on to Nazarick's future plans. The floor guardians answer by lowering their heads to Albedo in respect, but they do not kneel, making the hierarchy clear even in this quiet moment. Albedo accepts that exact level of respect without anger, because even she knows her authority exists only under the will of the 41 supreme beings. Once the room settles, Albedo begins the briefing with a firm first point, marking the start of Nazarick's next phase. In Nazarick's cluttered dressing room, Mamanga tests random gear from the old Yggdrasil stockpile and tries swinging a gleaming great sword. The sword slips from his hands at once, and Mamanga realizes warrior class restrictions still bind him even in this new reality. Looking in the mirror, Mamanga calmly studies his clothed skeleton body and admits his mind has changed along with it. He notes that strong emotions get forcibly suppressed, and even his crude worry over what undead life has cost him vanishes mid-thought. Mamanga concludes this emotional deadening is part of being undead, then decides he can still go on as long as his will remains his own. To test another rule, he casts Create Greater Item and wraps himself in engraved full-plate armor. The armor fits perfectly, and Mamanga is childishly thrilled to see a convincing warrior staring back from the mirror. When he says he wants to step out alone, the maids immediately protest because letting their master walk unguarded feels unthinkable to them. Mamanga privately admits the constant escorts, formal bows, and non-stop pressure of acting like Nazarick's perfect ruler are wearing him down. Desperate for a breather, he lies that he has secret business and forbids anyone to follow him. Feeling a stab of guilt but choosing freedom anyway, he activates the ring of Ain's old gown and teleports out. He arrives at Nazarick's moonlit surface mausoleum, only to freeze when three powerful evil lords and Demiurge are already waiting there. Mamanga tries to bluff past them in silence, and the whole group suddenly drops to one knee because they recognize their master instantly. Demiurge politely asks why his lord is here alone and dressed like this, and Mamanga quickly orders him to use the alias Dark Warrior instead. Demiurge suddenly acts as if he understands some grand hidden plan, while Mamanga quietly panics because he has no idea what Demiurge just inferred. When Demiurge insists he cannot let Dark Warrior go out unescorted, Mamanga grudgingly allows one companion. After Mamanga and Demiurge leave, the remaining evil lords reveal they would have recognized him anyway because Nazarick's servants can sense their master's aura. Albedo rushes up from below looking for Demiurge, and the moment she hears Mamanga came through here, she instantly loses her composure. She first panics over her dirty clothes and tangled hair, terrified of appearing before the man she loves in a shabby state. The evil lords talk her out of bathing first, arguing that showing signs of hard work is better than missing her chance to meet him. Convinced, Albedo hurries after Mamanga anyway, but she still stops to ask one last time if he will really accept seeing her like this. Outside, Mamanga steps onto Nazarick's surface grounds and takes in the eerie graveyard complex under a beautiful, unfamiliar night sky. The clear air and untouched stars hit him hard, because this world looks far more alive than the ruined reality he came from. Since the armor blocks most of his magic, he equips a wing-shaped necklace and uses it to fly instead. He rockets high into the sky while Demiurge struggles to keep up below. From hundreds of meters up, Mamanga stares at the moonlit land in stunned silence, and remembers how much one old guildmate loved unspoiled nature. The empty space beside him hurts, because the friend he wants to share this sight with is gone. Demiurge arrives in his winged half-demon form, and Mamanga quietly calls this world a jewel box his old friends would have loved. Demiurge reverently says the stars exist to adorn his master, and the flattery nudges Mamanga into imagining himself as the ruler of this whole world. What starts as a dramatic thought turns practical when Mamanga realizes spreading the name Ain's old gown everywhere might help his missing guildmates find him. Looking back toward Nazarick, Mamanga spots huge waves of earth rolling across the plains and realizes Mare is already reshaping the land to hide the tomb. Demiurge explains Mare is using golems and undead to help, and Mamanga follows up by checking the status of Nazarick's warning net. Satisfied with the perimeter but still cautious, Mamanga tells Demiurge to add another layer of security and then decides to reward Mare in person. Mamanga descends beside Mare's earthworks, and the timid dark elf boy runs over in his skirted outfit, startled that his master came himself. Mamanga gently tells Mare he does not need to be so tense and private, but Mare insists the supreme being must always be addressed respectfully. When Mare fears he is being called over for a mistake, Mamanga instead praises his camouflage work as crucial to Nazarek's survival. Following his old rule that a good boss should reward good work, Mamanga decides Mare deserves something tangible. Mare tries to refuse any reward at all, insisting he exists only to serve the supreme beings. Mamanga cuts through the argument by saying the reward itself is an order, and then reveals a ring of Ain's old gown. The sight terrifies Mare because he knows that ring belongs to the supreme beings alone. Mamanga explains the ring is needed so guardians can move freely despite Nazarek's teleport restrictions, and that Mare earned being the first to receive one. Mare finally accepts the ring with shaking hands and vows to work even harder for Nazarek. When Mare asks why his master is dressed as a warrior, Mamanga almost gets exposed because he still has no good answer. Albedo arrives like a moonlit vision and instantly saves him by declaring that this disguise was meant to inspect workers without interrupting them. Mamanga immediately agrees, and Mare is completely convinced that his master was being thoughtful all along. Albedo notices the ring on Mare's hand and for one ugly split second her face twists with shocked jealousy before she masks it again. After dismissing Mare back to work, Mamanga turns to Albedo and asks why she came. Albedo says she rushed here just to greet him and apologizes for appearing dirty, but Mamanga tells her even dust cannot dim her beauty. Then he gives Albedo a ring of Ain's old gown as well, saying the Guardian Overseer will need it. Albedo's calm thanks barely hide how ecstatic she is, and Mamanga teleports away before the mood gets any stranger. The chapter then cuts to dawn at Carne Village, where Enri and little Nemu are running for their lives with an armored knight close behind. Enri is exhausted enough to collapse, but she keeps forcing her body forward because she refuses to abandon her sister. Dark thoughts tell Enri to let Nemu go and save herself, and she angrily rejects them as the worst kind of betrayal. When Nemu stumbles, Enri nearly goes down too, and the knight catches up with them at last. Enri shoves Nemu behind her and squares up to the knight anyway, even though she knows she should have no chance. The knight mocks her struggle, so Enri snaps and punches his metal helmet with everything she has. She buys a heartbeat of space, but the knight lashes out and cuts a burning slash across her back. With the next killing blow coming down, Enri decides the only thing she can still do is die shielding Nemu long enough for her to escape. Back in Nazarek, Mamanga uses a mirror of remote viewing to study the land outside and learns its clumsy controls by trial and error. Seabass stays by his side, still clearly unhappy that his master went to the surface alone before this. After a long, frustrating struggle, Mamanga finally cracks the mirror's viewing controls and brightens like a programmer who just fixed a bug. Using the improved view, he finally spots a village about 10 kilometers south of Nazarek. At first the chaos almost looks like a festival, until Seabass coldly points out what it really is, a massacre. Mamanga's first instinct is to leave them, because helping strangers in an unknown world brings Nazarek risk and no clear gain. That heartless reaction shocks him, because he realizes the slaughter barely moves him at all anymore. Then the mirror catches a dying villager staring toward the unseen watcher and begging someone to save his daughter. When Seabass asks what he will do, Mamanga still says there is no reason to intervene. But Seabass reminds him too much of Touch Me, and that old memory of being saved by a friend's simple kindness breaks through Mamanga's hesitation. He finally decides to repay that debt by saving the village, and he also takes this as a chance to test his own power in the new world. He orders Nazarek to maximum alert, tells Seabass to send a fully equipped Albedo after him, and demands stealthy support units in case retreat becomes impossible. The mirror shows the injured older sister and her younger sibling cornered by a knight, so Mamanga grabs the staff of Ain's old gown and opens a gate at once. He steps through the gate and appears directly between the girls and their attacker before the sword can finish Enri off. Without fear or hesitation, he tests a brutal answer on the knight and casts Grasp Heart. The knight's heart is crushed instantly, and Mamanga is disturbed only by how little killing him makes him feel. A second knight appears, so Mamanga decides to use him as a test subject instead of killing him the same way. He chooses Dragon Lightning to measure how tough this world's soldiers really are, and the spell still kills the knight instantly. That easy kill tells Mamanga these knights are weak, but he stays cautious and decides he still needs a proper shield in front of him. He uses Create Mid-Tier Undead on the first corpse, and the dead knight mutates into a towering Death Knight wrapped in black armor and murderous aura. Mamanga orders the Death Knight to exterminate every armored attacker in the village, and it charges off with a roar that shakes the air. Its independence catches him off guard, because summoned undead and Yggdrasil should have stayed by his side instead of thinking for themselves. Before he can make another bodyguard, Albedo arrives through the still open gate in heavy black battle armor. Ready to massacre anyone he points at, Albedo asks how to dispose of these inferior lifeforms, making it obvious Seabass never explained the rescue properly. The girls are so terrified by Mamanga, the Death Knight, and Albedo together that they both wet themselves on the spot. Ignoring the awkward mess, Mamanga digs out a low-tier healing potion and offers it to Enri for the slash on her back. Enri thinks the potion might be poison but drinks it anyway to protect Ninyu, and the wound vanishes at once. Once he learns they understand the idea of magic, Mamanga openly declares himself a magic caster and starts building their protection. He seals Enri and Ninyu inside an anti-life cocoon and adds arrow protection so they can survive while he moves deeper into the village. Then he tosses them the horns of the goblin general and tells them to blow them if monsters are needed to guard them. As he turns to leave, the sisters finally understand he really saved them and call out trembling thanks. Their gratitude softens the moment, and when they beg him to save their parents too, Mamanga promises he will if they are still alive. Asked for his name, Mamanga rejects his old title in that instant and introduces himself to the outside world as Ain's old gown. Elsewhere in the village square, the Death Knight has turned the massacre around so completely that the armored raiders are now the ones trapped in terror. Lance Dijalanpo watches in horror as the undead monster toys with the raiders instead of killing them cleanly. One panicked man breaks and runs, and the Death Knight cuts him in half so fast everyone else understands there is no escape. Their swords barely matter against its armor, and the creature makes it even worse by clearly enjoying their fear. Captain Belius, the same coward who abused villagers moments ago, starts screaming for the others to die in his place and tries to bribe them to save him. Then one of the Death Knight's victims rises as a half-body zombie and grabs Belius by the ankles. The Death Knight brutally saws Belius apart in front of everyone, crushing whatever courage the raiders had left. Lance finally forces the survivors to act, ordering a retreat and a horn signal while others rush to behead corpses before they can rise too. The Death Knight plows through them anyway, and even Lance's strongest desperate swing ends with his own head flying off. A horn finally rings out over the village, reaching Ains while he is elsewhere testing how little mundane weapons can hurt him. In the middle of that quiet experiment, Albedo starts stumbling over his new public name, and Ains tells her she can call him Ains from now on. The idea thrills Albedo until she learns he wants everyone to do it, not just her. Ains then worries aloud that taking the guild's shared name for himself might offend the absent creators who built Nazarick. Albedo answers with painful honesty that some supreme beings may object, but the ones who left already abandoned Nazarick, and the one who stayed has every right to bear that name. Her words hit a buried resentment in him, and Ains finally decides he really will carry the name Ains' old gown unless his old comrades return to object. Albedo immediately turns that decision into worship, calling him both her master and the man she loves most, which Ains pointedly pretends not to process. Since the Death Knight is clearly handling the battle alone, Ains decides it is time to check on the surviving villagers. Before approaching them, he hides his skeletal face behind a decorative mask and gloves so he will look less like a walking nightmare. He also orders the Death Knight by mental link to leave any surviving attackers alive because prisoners may prove useful. Ains and Albedo fly over the village and arrive above the square, where only 4 exhausted knights are left alive among the corpses. He lands, introduces himself as Ains' old gown, and offers the surviving knights their lives if they surrender at once. The men instantly throw down their swords and drop flat on the blood-soaked ground. Ains spares them on one condition: they must tell their master not to stir trouble near this place again, or he will destroy their whole country. Once the knights flee, Ains quietly admits the dignified act is exhausting, but he keeps the mask on because the villagers are still watching. He orders the Death Knight to clear away its zombie thralls and approaches the villagers with a softer voice, trying not to frighten them further. The villagers are relieved he saved them, but they are still visibly afraid of the power standing in front of them. To make himself easier to accept, Ains bluntly says the rescue was not free and that he expects payment later. That crude demand actually calms them, so Ains says he will go fetch the 2 sisters he saved earlier and tells the villagers to stay put. As he walks off, Ains starts considering whether magic might be needed to alter the sisters' memories before they reveal too much. Inside the village chief's shabby house, Ains studies the bare room and quickly realizes just how poor this world's frontier villages are. Even while noting the low technology, Ains keeps his real goal in mind. He needs information about this world without exposing how ignorant he is. He also reminds himself to stay careful, because if this world hates undead and stronger beings exist somewhere out there, one mistake could turn fatal fast. The village chief and his weary wife finally sit across from him, both looking like hard years of farm work and the recent massacre aged them overnight. When they offer him boiled water, Ains declines, partly because he cannot drink through the mask and partly because the effort it took says a lot about their world. Ains leans into a courteous tone on purpose, because friendliness will get him farther here than blunt force or expensive memory magic. Before any bargaining starts, the chief and his wife bow so low their heads nearly hit the table and thank Ains for saving the whole village. That earnest gratitude hits Ains harder than expected, because Suzuki Satoru was never thanked like this in his old life. He pushes past the awkward warmth and asks the key question anyway: how much can this village actually pay? The chief offers 3,000 copper pieces, and Ains instantly realizes he has no idea whether that is generous, tiny, or absurd. To hide that blunder, Ains steers the talk toward larger denominations and quietly tries to learn the local money system without admitting anything. The chief admits the village barely uses gold at all, which tells Ains both how poor this place is and that gold pieces do exist here. Ains takes the next step and produces a Yggdrasil gold coin, hoping to learn what one of his own coins is worth in this world. The villagers react like they are looking at treasure from another land, which is exactly the opening Ains wanted. The chief fetches a balance scale and his wife compares the coin's size and weight, treating it like suspicious foreign money that still might be real. When the coin proves twice as heavy as a normal gold piece, the wife nervously asks to scratch it to check if it is only plated. Ains lets the insult pass, and in return he learns the answer he needed. At minimum, his coin counts as 2 local gold pieces. Ains tries to push a little farther by asking what else his coins could buy, but the chief suddenly takes the whole thing in a very different direction. The chief assumes Ains is only proving that a hero of his stature deserves far more than 3,000 coppers, and he desperately begs for mercy on the village. When the chief admits that paying more would doom the village through winter, Ains realizes this misunderstanding can actually save the negotiation. So Ains abruptly waives the money and leaves the couple stunned. He explains that he is a magic caster from Nazareth who lacks local knowledge, so instead of cash he wants information and secrecy. By framing information as a proper payment instead of charity, Ains neatly makes the deal feel believable to them. They promise to keep quiet, and Ains seals it with a handshake that secretly reassures him this world understands even that custom. With that settled, Ains finally asks the question he came here for: tell me about this place. The first names he hears are Riestais, Baharuth, and Slain, and none of them exist anywhere in Yggdrasil lore. That shakes Ains badly, because the magic matches Yggdrasil, but the world itself clearly does not. As the chief sketches the region around the village, Ains pieces together the map and realizes the attackers might not have been Imperial Knights at all. That means Ains made a real mistake by letting every enemy knight escape without keeping one alive for questioning. His thoughts jump from politics to survival, because if other Yggdrasil players are in this world too, he needs a plan before any of them decide Ains Ulgaun is their enemy. He quietly decides that from now on he needs noble-sounding reasons for his actions, so nobody can easily paint him as a villain. He also rechecks Nazareth in his head and knows the tomb is monstrously strong, but even that fortress is not something he wants to gamble with blindly. So he lands on the real priority: gather more information, watch for other players, and build up future fighting strength. When the topic shifts to monsters and adventurers, Ains learns this world has goblins, ogres, elves, dwarves, and gilded adventurers just like a fantasy world should. The chief also points him toward Erantil as the nearest big city, and Ains immediately marks it as the best place to learn the truth firsthand. Then Ains tests the language itself and discovers something even stranger: everyone understands each other through some built-in translation effect. That convinces Ains this world runs on rules deeper than he understands, and ignorance here could kill him just as surely as any enemy. His answer is simple but risky: he will have to live in a city for a while and learn this world by watching it up close. Before they can go any farther, a villager knocks on the door and calls the chief away for the burial. At the communal graveyard, the village gathers to bury its dead while the chief prays to a god Ains has never even heard of. Ains spots Enri and Nimu grieving over their parents' bodies, which makes the funeral feel painfully personal. Under his robe, Ains fingers a wand of resurrection and admits to himself that he could bring them all back if he chose to. In the end, he puts the wand away, because a man who can reverse death would attract far more danger than gratitude. He also notices the Death Knight still standing behind him long after its normal summoning time should have ended, adding one more mystery to this world. Albedo arrives beside him with an invisible 8-edged assassin, and Ains learns Nazareth had prepared 400 vassals to assault the village if needed. Ains shuts that down at once, orders everyone except Aura and Mare to withdraw, and keeps only the assassin force with the twins. As the burial ends and the sisters keep crying, Ains quietly steps away from the graveyard to think. Watching the sunset over Carne Village, Ains sorts out the political meaning of what he already did here instead of pretending he can still stay hidden. He concludes that giving his name and letting enemy knights flee was deliberate damage control, because rumors about Ains Ulgaun will spread anyway. More than that, he wants those rumors to reach any Yggdrasil players in this world and draw them out without openly hunting for them. He even starts thinking like a careful job hopper again, weighing which country might be safest to approach and most useful to Nazareth. When Ains finally says they are done here and should leave, Albedo's tense reply gives away that she has been holding something back. Pressed gently, Albedo bluntly admits she despises humans and would like to crush them like bugs, with Enri as the one exception. Ains tells her to control that hatred for now, because they need to keep up appearances in this world. Looking for the chief to say goodbye, Ains instead finds the villagers tense and staring toward the road as mounted strangers approach. Ains immediately takes control, orders the survivors into the chief's house, and promises this time he will handle things for free. A group of roughly 20 mounted warriors rides into the square, less uniformed than the earlier raiders but disciplined enough to matter. Their leader steps forward and introduces himself as Gazef Stranov, the Riestais kingdom's warrior captain sent to stop enemy raids. The title means little to Ains at first, but the chief hurriedly explains Gazef is the king's strongest warrior. Ains introduces himself as a magic caster named Ains Ulgaun who happened to save the village from the earlier attack. Gazef immediately dismounts and bows in gratitude, which tells Ains this famous warrior is the real thing and not some arrogant fraud. When Gazef asks about the attackers, Ains admits they are already dead and lets the man connect that fact to the terrifying Death Knight at his side. Gazef wants to know what kind of magic item could be controlling such a monster, and Ains smoothly hides behind the mystery of his mask. Ains even claims removing the mask might make him lose control of the Death Knight, a lie that instantly stops anyone from pushing the issue. Trying to calm the village, Ains asks Gazef's men to put down their weapons, but Gazef can only refuse for the king's gifted sword. Before they can settle in for talks, a breathless scout rushes in with bad news. The village is already surrounded. Outside the village, a cold-eyed commander with black sclerae gives the order to close the trap, and the Sunlight Scripture moves like a trained machine. These are not random raiders but the slain Theocracy's Sunlight Scripture, a small elite force of divine casters built for extermination missions. Their commander, Nigan Grid Lewin, reveals the real mission: assassinate Gazef Stranov while he is stripped of the kingdom's treasured gear. Nigan almost sounds irritated that the Theocracy had to use his unit for this, but he still sees the kingdom's internal politics as the perfect opening. He even thinks back to an old scar and his hatred for Blue Rose, making it clear this man wraps personal grudges inside holy rhetoric. For Nigan, Gazef is not just a target but a sacrifice, because he believes humanity should unite under the Theocracy's version of righteousness. He reassures his uneasy subordinates that without the kingdom's 5 treasures, even Gazef can be killed here. And to make sure, Nigan carries a rare relic of the Theocracy as a hidden trump card. When the appointed time arrives, the Sunlight Scripture begins chanting and summons ranks of angels around the village. Back inside a darkened house, Gazef sees the encirclement clearly now and understands this trap was built for him, not for the village. Ains asks the obvious question, and Gazef answers grimly that only the slain Theocracy's 6 scriptures fit this scale of hatred and preparation. With no time left, Gazef asks to hire Ains, hoping even now the masked caster might join the fight. Ains refuses, and when Gazef pushes for even the loan of the Death Knight, he refuses that too. Gazef even floats the idea of conscripting him by law, and Ains quietly warns that would be a terrible mistake. Gazef's instincts tell him that making an enemy of this man would get them all killed before the real battle even started. So Gazef gives up on hiring Ains for himself and asks for one thing only: if he dies out there, protect the villagers. This time Ains accepts, swearing on the name of Ains' old gown that the villagers will be safe. Before Gazef leaves, Ains slips him a small carved statuette that looks trivial but clearly is not. Gazef chooses to charge before nightfall, partly to fight on equal terms and partly so Ains can see exactly how desperate the situation really is. After Gazef rides out, Ains admits he has started to like these humans, almost like small animals instead of insects. He tells Albedo to have Nazarik's hidden servants knock out the ambushers around the village once they are found. Then the village chief rushes up in panic, angry and afraid because it looks to him like Gazef just abandoned them. Ains explains the truth bluntly. Gazef left because the enemy wants him, and staying would only turn the village into the battlefield. Once the chief realizes Gazef rode out as bait to save them, his anger collapses into shame. Ains tells them not to waste that sacrifice, gather everyone into a large house, and get ready to flee when the opening comes. Because he promised Gazef, Ains adds one more layer of safety and says he will protect the shelter house with magic. Out on the plain, Gazef rides toward the trap knowing a breakthrough is suicidal but still the only way to pull the enemy away from the village. His soldiers understand they are riding into death too, and instead of hesitation they answer him with fierce loyalty. Gazef opens with an arrow at a frontline caster, but it bounces off harmlessly under magic protection. The enemy answers with mind control, and Gazef's warhorse rears under him hard enough to nearly throw him off. Realizing the horse has been magically controlled, Gazef drops to the ground and keeps charging on foot. An angel dives on him at once, and Gazef proves why he is the kingdom's strongest by cutting it down after turning his blade magical with martial arts. That success does not save him, because more angels appear and Gazef sees the whole village encirclement is now converging on his position. He takes one grim comfort from that: if every sentry is here, then the road out of the village may finally be open. His men ignore his order to scatter and wheel back into the fight instead, making Gazef both furious and proud at once. The enemy punishes them with more control magic, throwing soldiers from their horses and letting angels tear into the dismounted men. With his men collapsing around him, Gazef decides the only possible win left is to cut straight for the enemy commander. He explodes into his ultimate martial arts, stepping into the realm of heroes and carving through 6 angels in a single flash. For one brief moment his men cheer, because Gazef makes the impossible look possible. Nigan crushes that hope immediately by ordering more summons and telling every caster to focus their spells on Gazef. Gazef keeps cutting down angel after angel, but the enemy can replace them faster than one swordsman can clear them. The real turning point comes when dozens of invisible strikes from the priest slam into Gazef all at once and leave him coughing blood. The angels press him without pause, and with his stamina burning out, Gazef can barely stay upright long enough to keep killing one at a time. Another barrage finally knocks him off balance, and Gazef crashes down onto the grass with death closing in from every side. Even on the edge of collapse, Gazef forces himself back to his feet and roars that as the warrior captain of the kingdom, he will not lose to invaders like this. Nigan mocks him for valuing peasant lives over his own, but Gazef refuses that logic completely. Instead, Gazef laughs and tells Nigan the village is already guarded by a man stronger than he is, making the commander dismiss the claim as dying bravado. Nigan gives the final order for the angels to kill Gazef, and the execution begins. Then Ain's hidden trick triggers, and Gazef suddenly hears a voice say it is time to switch. In an instant, Gazef is teleported out of the killing field and dropped inside the villagers' protected shelter instead. The chief explains that Ains had been here a moment ago, and vanished just as Gazef appeared, making the rescue unmistakable. As Gazef collapses at last, he lets himself believe one thing completely: whatever comes next, Ain's old gown will not lose. At sunset on the empty plains, Nigan stares in shock as Gazef is gone and two strangers now stand where the battle should have ended. Nigan pulls his angels back into a defensive ring, already wary of the masked magic caster's unknown teleportation. The masked caster calmly introduces himself as Ain's old gown and says the black-armored woman behind him is Albedo. Nigan gives no answer, so Ains politely asks for a moment to discuss a deal instead. Ains opens the negotiation by saying the one thing Nigan never expected to hear: there is no way they can beat him. Nigan bristles at the insult, but Ains points out the obvious: he only came here because he already knew he would win. Ains suddenly asks if the angels were summoned by third-tier magic, because he is testing how closely this world matches Yggdrasil. Nigan cuts him off and demands to know where Gazef went, and Ains answers so easily that it sounds even more unsettling. When Nigan calls that a lie, Ains says he answered honestly because there is no point lying to men who are about to die. Ains reveals what truly offended him: Nigan dared to threaten the villagers Ains had personally rescued. He offers one last deal anyway: surrender your lives quietly and die without pain, or resist and die in despair. That single step crushes the nerve of veteran soldiers, and even Nigan feels the warning of real death crawl up his spine. Panicking, Nigan screams for two archangel flames to charge before Ains can get any closer. The angels stab Ains clean through, and for one brief second the sunlight scripture thinks his grand act was only a bluff. Then the scene turns monstrous again, because Ains does not fall, does not bleed, and simply keeps standing there. Ains calmly grabs both angels by the throat and holds them up like they weigh nothing, shattering the unit's confidence all over again. He explains that weak attacks simply do not affect him, turning their terror into a lesson before he ends the demonstration. With one brutal motion, Ains smashes both angels into the ground and they burst into fading motes of light. Ains drops the last pretense and tells them the games are over, because from here on it will be a massacre. Nigan nearly breaks and thinks about running, but pride and desperation make him order every remaining angel to attack at once. Ains casually tells Albedo to stand back, as if the charging wall of angels is only a minor inconvenience. He casts Negative Burst, and a black flash wipes out the entire angel wave in a single instant. Seeing every summon erased at once, Nigan finally realizes Gazef had told the truth about Ains being stronger than all of them combined. Nigan grabs at the idea that maybe Ains is only on the level of the Black Scripture, because admitting anything worse would break him. The rank and file lose their nerve first, screaming as they dump every spell they know onto Ains in blind panic. The barrage crashes over Ains and does absolutely nothing, while he coolly notes that these spells are familiar too. One terrified soldier tries a sling as a last resort, and that tiny attack finally makes Albedo move. Albedo reflects the projectile straight back into the attacker, smashing his head apart, and proving she is every bit as terrifying as her master. Ains mildly explains the trick and even scolds Albedo for defending him from an attack too weak to matter. Albedo answers that letting a petty sling bullet touch a supreme being would itself be an insult. Cornered again, Nigan throws in his stronger reserve angel, the Principality of Observation, even though using it this way means he is already grasping at straws. Ains orders Albedo back again and casually catches the heavy angel's mace blows in one gauntlet hand. Then Ains flicks a tiny flame onto the angel, and that weak-looking spark blooms into black fire that melts it out of existence. Nigan finally loses control and screams that no one should be able to erase a high-tier angel with one spell, so who is Ains really? Ains answers with the same name as before, and that simple certainty terrifies Nigan more than any boast could. As dusk deepens, Nigan's men ask what to do, and he snaps at them before deciding on one desperate last card. Nigan orders his men to protect him and pulls out a sealed crystal, because he plans to summon the strongest angel humanity knows. Ains recognizes the crystal as a Yggdrasil-style spell-sealing item and cautiously tells Albedo to protect him just in case the summon is truly dangerous. Nigan crushes the crystal and a blinding sacred radiance floods the field as the legendary angel descends. Dominion Authority appears above them, a highest-order angel so holy and unnatural that Nigan's men instantly believe victory is back within reach. Ains looks at their trump card and sounds almost disappointed, which makes Nigan's relief wobble into fresh unease. Nigan praises Ains for forcing out such a divine weapon, but Ains and Albedo keep chatting calmly like the legendary angel is barely worth noticing. That indifference shatters Nigan's confidence, and for the first time he wonders if Ains might be stronger than the strongest angel on the continent. Unable to accept that thought, Nigan screams for Dominion Authority to cast Holy Smite anyway. Ains tells him to go ahead because he will not interfere, which somehow makes the coming attack feel even worse. Dominion Authority breaks its own scepter to empower the spell, and Ains calmly identifies the move like a player recognizing familiar game mechanics. Holy Smite crashes down from the heavens in a colossal pillar of blue-white divine light and completely engulfs Ains. When the light fades, Ains is still standing and even laughing, pleased that the attack finally let him test what pain feels like now. That result freezes the entire battlefield, but Albedo reacts first with pure fury that anyone dared make Ains feel pain at all. She launches into a savage promise of endless torture, and the killing malice pouring off her feels like a monster trying to tear its way out of the armor. Ains stops her with a quiet command, and Albedo instantly reins herself in because only he can do that. He says everything is proceeding as expected, and Albedo immediately melts back into reverent admiration. Still trying to explain what he is seeing, Nigan blurts out that Ains and Albedo must be demon gods. Clinging to that desperate theory, he orders Dominion Authority to use Holy Smite a second time. Ains finally takes his turn for real and casts Black Hole before the second Holy Strike can land. A tiny black point opens on the angel's body, expands, and quietly swallows the entire highest order summon into nothing. With the light gone and only wind left on the plane, Nigan can finally say out loud what he knows now. Ains is beyond anything he understands. Ains gives the same answer again and adds one more trap. Nobody can teleport away because he already sealed the field and prepared subordinates in ambush. Then the sky itself cracks for a moment, because some outside watcher was scrying the battlefield and Ains' anti-divination defense just hit back. Ains casually explains that the theocracy was spying on them, and he almost sounds annoyed that his counterattack spell was not stronger. At that point Nigan's courage collapses completely, because he understands he has stopped being the hunter and become prey. He tries to save only himself, throwing away all dignity as he begs Ains for a deal and offers money, power, and ransom from his country. Albedo answers first, reminding him that he already rejected Ains' merciful offer and has no right to ask for another. She makes the real rule brutally clear. Once Ains has decided on a death, humans like them should simply bow and accept it. Nigan looks to Ains for mercy anyway, but Ains only confirms the sentence and promises a swift death as his final kindness. Afterward, under the starry night, Ains walks back toward the village and quietly admits to himself that he may have overplayed the terrifying ruler act. He tells himself he had to act that way in front of Albedo, because he cannot afford to look weak before his own subordinates. Albedo asks why he bothered to save Gazef at all, and Ains says this mess was their fault, so they should clean it up themselves. When she asks about the item he gave Gazef, Ains says it was groundwork for future plans, and no real loss to him. Albedo says Ains never needed to step in personally for mere humans, but Ains uses that opening to warn her against underestimating an unknown world. He explains that Gazef was useful as a probe, because this world may still contain enemies stronger than even Ains himself. Albedo immediately reframes that as elegant use of inferior humans, and her delight at his planning is obvious. Ains adds the deeper reason. Saving Gazef at the brink of death earns gratitude, hides the truth from the kingdom, and gave him prisoners to question later. Albedo praises him again, and Ains quietly enjoys the feeling that maybe he really did sound like a proper ruler just now. Then Albedo circles back to the one thing she hated most, watching swords pierce Ains even if she knew he would be unharmed. Ains explains he already tested his physical nullification earlier, but Albedo says that does not matter to a woman watching the man she loves get stabbed. Ains has absolutely no idea how to answer that, so he lets the subject die and keeps walking toward the village. At the village edge, the survivors come out to meet them with the Death Knight leading the way, and their relief turns into open gratitude. Gazef is there too, badly bruised and swollen but alive, and Ains apologizes that the item he gave him took time to activate. Gazef thanks him sincerely and asks what happened to the enemy, giving Ains one more chance to hide Nazarek's involvement. Ains lies smoothly that he only chased them off, then quietly notices the ring on Gazef's left hand and feels relieved that Gazef's wife will not be widowed tonight. After a tense beat, Gazef simply accepts the answer and offers Ains a warm welcome if he ever comes to the royal capital. Gazef even asks him to stay and travel with them, but Ains says he was already planning to move on. Even so, Gazef repeats that Ains will always be welcome in the capital and thanks him again for the equipment he recovered from the attackers. With everything in Carne finally settled, Ains lowers his voice to Albedo and says it is time to go home. In Ains' silent private room, Albedo calmly reports that the captured Sunlight Scripture commander has been locked in the frozen prison for interrogation. Ains says neuronists should handle the questioning and adds that he wants the enemy bodies preserved for experiments. Albedo says the fake knight's weapons and armor have little magic on them and will be stored in the treasury once the checks are done. She also proposes sending shadow demons to watch Carne village, and Ains decides Gazef should be left alone while Nazarek builds goodwill with the village instead. When the report ends, Ains notices Albedo looks especially pleased today. The reason is obvious when Ains sees Albedo lovingly stroking the ring of Ains' old gown on her left ring finger like a wedding promise. That sight hits Ains with guilt, because he knows her devotion comes from the character settings he altered himself. He starts to confess that her love is only the result of his meddling, but he cannot finish the thought. Albedo gently cuts through his guilt by asking what kind of person she was before he changed her. Ains internally panics because the truthful answer is impossible to say out loud. Instead of doubting him, Albedo says she is happy as she is now and tells him he does not need to feel upset. When Ains still hesitates, Albedo presses him with one sharp question: does her love actually trouble him? Ains hurriedly denies it, because the affection of someone as beautiful as Albedo is not something he truly dislikes. Albedo corners the logic completely. If it does not trouble him, then there is no problem. In one last attempt to escape, Ains asks whether she wants to return to her original self and undo what he changed. Albedo answers without blinking that Tabula would gladly approve of giving his daughter away for marriage. Before Ains can process that, a crash interrupts them as a long sword suddenly hits the floor. Ains realizes the newly summoned Death Knight has vanished, leaving only this world's sword behind. From that, he works out a new rule: ordinary summoned undead disappear, but the Death Knight made from a corpse may have remained because it was created from local material. That discovery immediately turns practical, and Ains concludes Nazarick could become stronger if he had more corpses to work with. Albedo instantly offers to gather a large supply of bodies for him. Ains allows the idea but specifically warns her not to dig up Carne Village's graveyard. Albedo accepts the limit, notes they will need fresh corpses instead, and reminds Ains that everyone should already be assembled in the throne room. She leaves ahead while Ains prepares to follow with Seabass. Out in the corridor, Albedo meets Seabass, who has come to escort Ains. Seabass notices she is in an unusually good mood, and Albedo's smug expression says he is right. Once Ains is out of earshot, Albedo lets the fantasy spill out and vows she will be the one sitting beside him, with shelter reduced to a footrest. She even murmurs that her succubus blood is boiling, while Seabass simply watches her strange outburst in silence. The scene shifts to the throne room, where Ains enters fashionably late with Seabass and finds Nazarick's guardians and chosen vassals already kneeling in total silence. Ains climbs the steps, takes the throne, and looks down over the monstrous but magnificent gathering created by his old guildmates. He opens with a formal apology for acting on his own, not because he means it, but because he wants to reassure them that he still trusts his subordinates. Then he interrupts his own explanation with magic and shatters the old manga banner hanging above. With the old symbol cast down, Ains announces that he has changed his name and points everyone to the banner of Ains' old gown behind the throne. He slams his staff down and dares anyone who objects to stand and speak. No one objects, and Albedo immediately leads the room in a new oath of loyalty to Ains' old gown. The guardians and servants thunder their praise together, turning the entire throne room into a roaring ceremony of submission. Even while he accepts their cheers, Ains silently wonders what his absent guildmates would think of him taking their shared name for himself. He moves on to the real order and tells Nazarick its new absolute mission is to make the name Ains' old gown an eternal legend. He explains they will surpass every hero in this world and spread that name by force or by strategy, whatever works. Behind that grand speech is Ains' private hope that the legend will reach any old guildmates who might also exist somewhere in this world. He finishes with overwhelming presence, and the assembled denizens bow their heads like worshippers before a god. After Ains leaves, the throne stands empty, but the hall is still boiling with loyalty and excitement. Albedo calls everyone to raise their heads and tells them to carry out Ains' orders before she adds one more announcement. She turns to Demiurge and orders him to repeat the words Ains once said while looking at the night sky. Demiurge explains Ains compared the world to an ownerless chest of jewels that should adorn Nazarick and his old friends. He takes that metaphor as proof of Ains' hidden ambition and reminds everyone that Ains said conquering the world would be interesting. The room instantly accepts that reading, and the eyes of Nazarick's servants turn razor-sharp with purpose. Albedo stands beneath the banner and declares that true loyalty means understanding Ains' hidden intentions before he has to say them outright. She turns that devotion into a final mission statement. Nazarick's goal is to present the entire world to Ains. The chapter closes with countless voices answering as one that everything in the world will be offered to its rightful ruler, Ains. In Nazarick's lavish office, Ains sits alone behind a grand desk and quietly admits he still has no clear answer for what to do next. He reflects that ever since Yggdrasil ended and he was trapped here in his undead avatar, ruling Nazarick has become a very real burden. Albedo stands beside him like a flawless attendant and answers his muttering with absolute loyalty, promising that everything will move as he desires. Ains appreciates that loyalty, but inside he feels the strain of acting like a perfect supreme ruler when he used to be just an ordinary salaryman. The biggest problem is still information, so Ains asks for the next report, and Albedo immediately places it in his hands. Aura's report says her search team found a lake beyond the forest, but more importantly they still have not found a single trace of other Yggdrasil players. That one line eases his nerves, because other players are still the threat Ains fears most in this world. He orders Aura's group to keep searching, but before Albedo can finish her reply, a quiet knock interrupts the room. Albedo checks the visitor and announces that Shelter wants an audience, and Ains lets her in at once. Shelter enters with perfect grace, looking like a beautiful young girl in a black gown, but carrying the dangerous presence of Nazarick's vampire guardian. When Ains asks why she came, Shelter answers without shame that she simply wanted to admire his handsome face. Ains is caught off guard, and Albedo's smile instantly curdles into something much darker as she watches Shelter flirt. Relieved that Albedo's glare is aimed at Shelter instead of him, Ains stays quiet as the two rivals start circling each other. Albedo tries to drive Shelter out by saying she is interrupting serious work about Nazarek's future. Shelter fires back with a nasty jab about old hags clinging to youth, and the argument immediately turns vicious. Albedo answers with her own poison, mocking Shelter like spoiled food stuffed with preservatives. Their insults keep escalating until Shelter openly threatens to kill her, and the fight is one step away from becoming real. Ains cuts in before the room explodes, ordering them to stop their little game. The instant he speaks, both women snap back into perfect innocent smiles so fast that even Undead Ains finds it unsettling. Ains knows exactly why they clash so badly. Both of them are genuinely in love with him. But he still cannot accept those feelings lightly, especially after Shelter once praised his bone structure so sincerely that it shook him for days. Pushing that bizarre memory aside, Ains asks Shelter again whether she came for a real reason. This time Shelter explains that she is heading out to meet Seabass and carry out the mission Ains assigned her, so she came to say goodbye before leaving Nazareth for a while. Remembering the order, Ains sends her off with a calm warning to complete the task carefully and return home safely. Shelter happily accepts, and Ains adds one more instruction. On her way out, she is to tell Narbril or Intoma to send Demiurge to him for contingency planning. The story opens in Irantal, a heavily fortified border city whose busy central market suddenly goes quiet when two unusual new adventurers step out of the guild. People stare less because they fear them and more because Nabe is stunning and Maman looks like a walking legend despite the humble copper plates around their necks. Once they reach a quieter muddy side street, Nabe nearly calls him Ains Sama again, and Maman cuts her off before their cover slips. Ains firmly reminds her that here they are just Maman and Nabe, and even her respectful Sama sounds dangerously out of place. Nabe awkwardly tries to obey, but she still cannot treat him like an equal partner, which immediately shows how hard this disguise will be. When Nabe asks why Albedo is not the one guarding him, Ains admits he left her behind because Nazareth itself is safest in her hands. Ains remembers how fiercely Albedo opposed this trip until Demiurge whispered something to her, and she suddenly turned supportive, a change that still leaves him uneasy. Back in the street, Ains explains he came to Urantal in person because relying only on reports would be reckless when he still knows so little about this world. Then Ains tests something important, and asks Nabe straight out if she sees humans as inferior lifeforms. Nabe answers instantly that humans are worthless trash, confirming the exact attitude Ains was afraid of bringing into a crowded city. Ains quietly regrets that more of Nazareth thinks this way than he hoped, and he reflects that Albedo would have been even more dangerous in a human city. He also admits to himself that the real reason he left Albedo behind is simpler. He needs direct eyes on the world because he does not trust his own leadership if he stays hidden in Nazareth. Thinking about Albedo's love only makes him feel guilty, because he remembers that he himself rewrote her settings as a last joke before Yggdrasil ended. Ains shakes off the guilt and orders Nabe to control herself, because they are in a human city and making enemies carelessly could expose them to unknown powers. He adds one more warning: if they fight seriously, humans may feel the killing intent coming off them, so Nabe is not to go all out without permission. Soon they reach the rough and the guild recommended, and because neither of them can read the local writing, they had to find it by matching the sign's picture. Inside, the tavern is darker, dirtier, and rougher than Ains expected, packed with adventurers who all stop to size up the flashy newcomer. The scarred bald innkeeper explains this place is where low-rank adventurers build contacts, and he bluntly warns Maman that paying for a private room means missing that chance. Ains still chooses a double room and no food, which makes the innkeeper grumble that he had better be more than just a loud set of armor. Before he can finish checking in, a nearby adventurer sticks out a foot to trip him and deliberately starts the usual rookie intimidation game. Ains answers the provocation with a deadpan insult, mocking the man's short leg instead of backing down. When the thug demands Nabe for the night, Ains actually laughs at how perfectly he sounds like a cheap street punk. Ains asks one cutting question about Gazev Stranov, decides the man is nowhere near that level, and ends the whole contest instantly. With one arm, Ains lifts the man clear off the ground and casually throws him hard enough to smash a table across the room. The room goes dead silent, and Ains coolly invites the man's friends to come all at once if they want the same treatment. Instead of a brawl, the next person to challenge him is the red-haired adventurer whose potion got smashed when that table exploded. Britta demands repayment for the potion she saved up to buy, and Ains realizes she is furious for good reason even if the thug started it. Ains first tries to push the cost onto the idiot who provoked him, but Britta cuts through that, and says she does not care who pays as long as she gets a potion or the money back. When Britta names the price, Ains decides not to haggle and hands her one of his own healing potions instead. Britta accepts, though she clearly suspects the strange red potion may be more valuable than she expected. Ains rushes the moment to a close before Nabe's hostility causes fresh trouble, pays for the room, and orders an adventurer's kit from the innkeeper. Upstairs, the innkeeper gives them a bare little room, and Ains tries to accept the shabby conditions as part of living like real low-rank adventurers. Alone at last, Ains dismisses the black full-plate disguise and reveals his skeletal body covered in carefully chosen magic items beneath it. Freed from the armor, Ains reflects that adventurers in this world are less romantic explorers and more anti-monster contractors with shaky political status. When Nabe complains about Britta, Ains insists they need to behave like normal adventurers and not build a reputation for being impossible over a single potion. He also points out that Britta outranks them as an iron plate, so showing her basic respect helps their cover instead of hurting it. Nabe then blurts out that only exotic top-tier metals would suit Ains, forcing him to stop her again before she accidentally exposes just how abnormal their standards are. Ains lays out the mission clearly: rise through the adventurer ranks, gather information on this world, and especially watch for any Yggdrasil players besides himself. The first practical problem is money, because most of Nazarik's wealth is in Yggdrasil gold coins that Ains refuses to circulate unless absolutely necessary. He explains that their gold is worth a lot here, but spending it could signal other transferred players that someone from Yggdrasil has arrived. That fear leads him back to the slain theocracy, where he suspects most human players would naturally side against Nazarik if they learned what he is. He regrets losing Nigan so quickly during interrogation, because the Sunlight Scripture prisoners knew enough to confirm that the theocracy is exactly the kind of human cause players might rally around. For now, Ains decides their next steps are simple: sell the enemy swords later, get a paying job first, and start blending into the city properly. He reactivates the armored mom in disguise and orders Nabe to stay in the room on guard while he scouts the area alone, including a large graveyard he wants to inspect. After he leaves, Nabe's hard expression finally droops, but she still follows orders by boosting her hearing with a spell instead of wandering outside. Nabe uses message to report back to Albedo, starting with the one detail Albedo cares about most. Ains said he trusts her more than anyone else. That sends Albedo into delighted chaos, and she immediately orders Nabe to keep spreading the idea that she is the one closest to Ains. Albedo also admits she plans to close the distance with Ains while Shalter is away, treating the whole thing like a campaign against her romantic rival. When Albedo asks why Nabe chose her side, Nabe answers bluntly that she thinks Albedo is simply more fit to stand beside Ains than Shalter is. The conversation spirals into faction talk among the Pleiades, with Nabe weighing which maids might support Albedo and which lean toward Shalter. Albedo finally circles back to what she really wants and makes Nabe recount everything Ains has been doing in exact detail. Meanwhile, Britta follows the innkeeper's tip to the best herbalist in Irantal, carrying the odd red potion and hoping to learn what she really got. Inside, she meets the young herbalist Nfiria Berar, a shy-looking boy in stained coveralls who becomes instantly serious the moment he sees the potion. Nfiria leads her into the workshop and calls over his grandmother, Lizzie Berar, the city's legendary herbalist. One look at the bottle makes Lizzie's entire demeanor change, and she starts interrogating Britta as if she has just walked in holding a miracle. Britta explains she got it from a mysterious man in full plate at the inn, and that only makes Lizzie more interested. Lizzie gives Britta a fast lesson on the 3 kinds of potions, then points out the shocking part: normal healing potions are blue, but this one is bright red. After appraising it with magic, Lizzie erupts in manic excitement because the potion does not deteriorate at all and looks like the perfected form every herbalist has been chasing. To Lizzie, this is no ordinary healing item but something close to the legendary god's blood, a discovery that could change potion making itself. She finally gives Britta the practical answer too. Its healing is around 2nd tier spell level, and even the base price is already far beyond what Britta imagined. Then Lizzie tries to buy it on the spot for a huge sum, and Britta freezes because she suddenly suspects refusing might be just as risky as accepting. The next morning, Mammon returns to the Adventurers Guild looking for work, only to run straight into a simple problem he forgot to solve. He still cannot read a single quest notice. To hide that weakness, Ains blindly tears down a quest and brings it to the desk like he meant to choose it all along. The bluff works almost too well, because the receptionist reveals he picked a Mithra rank mission and refuses to bend the guild rules for a copper plate. Ains pushes back on purpose, acting like a strong veteran stuck doing beneath him jobs until the room starts wondering if the flashy armor is actually justified. He seals the act by declaring that Nabe can cast 3rd tier magic and that he himself is a matching warrior, instantly changing how everyone in the guild sees them. The receptionist still cannot break guild procedure, but by the time she apologizes, Ains has already steered the situation into a win and asks her for the hardest copper job instead. Before that can happen, a silver rank team called Swords of Darkness steps in and offers Mammon a more worthwhile job with them. Ains accepts the invitation and follows them into a private room, deciding that the chance to build ties and gather information is worth hearing them out. Peter introduces the team one by one, and Ains quickly reads them as young but seasoned fighters who move like people used to danger. The most interesting reveal for Ains is Nina's talent, a rare and born gift that let him master magic in half the normal time. Ains becomes intensely interested the moment he hears that, because talents are native abilities Nazarik does not possess and might be worth acquiring at any cost. When Ains asks about a more famous talent holder in town, the team assumes he is a foreigner and explains who that local prodigy is. That prodigy is Nfiria Berar, a boy whose talent lets him use almost any magic item, a detail that immediately makes Ains file him under both useful and dangerous. After that, the team explains the job itself, not a posted request, but a shared monster hunt outside the city where rewards depend on what they kill. They plan to patrol near the forest by the slain theocracy, mostly expecting goblins and wolves, and they are relaxed enough that Ains starts probing how dangerous those goblins really are here. The team reassures him that truly dangerous goblins are tribal leaders who would not normally charge into human territory, so this is routine work for them. Ains agrees to join them, and to build trust, he removes his helmet for a moment and shows the young team the foreign face hidden beneath it. The gesture works, until Luckrut immediately ruins the mood by asking the real question on his mind and confessing to Nabe on the spot. Nabe rejects him with savage contempt, calling him an inferior life form and threatening to rip out his tongue, which forces Mammon and Peter into mutual apology mode. Even so, the team decides to move out once preparations are done, and Ains quietly learns that adventurers here can even buy travel rations right from the guild counter. Back in the guild lobby, they walk into a new surprise. Nfiria Bear is waiting there, and he has already posted a personal request from Mammon by name. The room's attention makes Nabe shift into obvious protective battle posture, and Ains realizes she is about to ruin their cover over nothing. Ains fixes it the fastest way possible by karate chopping Nabe on the head, then calmly asks who requested him. When he hears the name Nfiria Bear, Ains instantly recognizes that the town's famous talent holder has just come looking for him. Even with all those eyes on him, Ains refuses to abandon the first deal he already made and insists on hearing Nfiria's offer properly before deciding anything. That fair answer earns respect instead of suspicion, and Ains cleverly invites the Swords of Darkness to sit in on the briefing too. In private, Nfiria explains the real job: escort him into the nearby forest, protect him while he gathers herbs, and help with harvesting if possible. Ains immediately sees that forest escort duty suits Peter's team better than his own, so instead of taking the whole job, he proposes combining forces and splitting the pay evenly. Everyone agrees, and just like that, Mammon turns a suspicious personal request into a cooperative expedition with new local allies. When Ains asks the obvious question of why Nfiria picked him at all, the boy admits he heard about the infight and figured a strong copperplate would be both capable and affordable. That answer lowers Ains' guard for now, and after a few final travel questions, the new party settles on departing as soon as they are ready. That night, the story shifts under Irantel's giant graveyard, where a hooded blonde woman slips into a mausoleum like a ghost on secret business. Inside, she opens a hidden passage and descends into a foul underground lair lit by candles made from blood. The man waiting there is Khajiit Dale Bedantel, a corpse-pale necromancer tied to the secret society Zuranon, and already busy feeding power into an orb of death. Clementine reveals why she came by producing the Crown of Wisdom, a stolen slain theocracy treasure that drove its wearer insane the moment she tore it off. Khajiit calls the crown nearly useless without a suitable wearer, but Clementine shrugs off the ruined priestess and says she wants help finding someone who can use it. She also casually mentions a terrifying godkin in the Black Scripture, hinting that some powers in the theocracy are strong enough to frighten even monsters like these. Then she finally names her target, the outstanding talent holder in Irantel, whom she thinks might be able to wear the crown. Clementine asks Khajiit for a distraction during the kidnapping, offering to help his death ritual in return, and Khajiit smiles because the bargain serves both of their crimes perfectly.